We are rolling.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Creative Businessmen. Today we have comedian James Hodge with us in the studio.
Hey.
What's up, James?
What's up? How's it going, guys?
Good, man. Thanks for coming on. We'll just let you tell everyone a little about yourself, and we'll start from there.
No.
No.
You guys, I don't know. Like, what do you,
Well, you
what do you want to know?
Well, you're a professional comedian,
Right.
And you,
Yep.
I know you've toured with some big names. One of them was Dave Chappelle.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. So I guess what got you into comedy?
Probably like 15 years ago, my ex-wife and I and her best friend, who was like the super put together, like competent, like master's degree in like urban planning chick, went and saw Norm Macdonald
Yeah.
doing a show. And like after the show, like she absolutely fucked him. So I was like, what? I should do comedy. No, that's not the only, like I always kind of wanted to do comedy, but I did theater when I was younger, and I was moving to LA, and then like 9/11 happened. I was literally on the way to LA.
How old were you then?
23.
Okay,
Yeah,
so about
23.
the same age. A little older,
Yeah. So, but I was literally on the way, stopped in Memphis, got a hotel room, woke up the next morning, turned the TV on, and like the towers were falling.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this might be a sign. I think I'll head back home. So I came back here and finished college, got married, like had kids, and that all fell apart. I mean, the kids are fine, but like the marriage went to shit like it did. And so I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go try comedy. So I did. And for whatever reason, I took to it. And I don't know, I was always, like I did a lot of theater when I was younger and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So the transition wasn't as tough for me
Right, yeah.
as it is for some people. But I don't know, I just got into it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm just going to do this.
That's cool. Yeah, I started acting too. So I started acting about 8 years ago, and then started doing comedy about a year and a half ago. And it's I think coming from an acting background, it's a lot easier than just jumping right into it. And
Plus you got that chin, so acting's like for you. Like
but I love comedy, man. I actually like it more.
yeah, it's the thing that I like about comedy is it's freedom to do. Like you write it, you block it. It's whatever you want it to be.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to worry about if some dude who wrote a play in 1936 wrote a joke that's still going to stand up now.
Right.
It's if it doesn't work, it's on me. But if it works, it's all me. So I can be like,
Right.
yeah, I did this shit.
One person show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think that's what I enjoy about it. It's real challenging. It's like a Rubik's Cube.
Not really. It's pretty easy. No, I'm kidding. No, it is. No, that's one of the things. Like it really is. It's a challenge, and it constantly humbles you.
Yeah.
Because no matter how good of a run you go on, you'll catch a rough one every now. Like you can never beat. And I don't mean like bombing. Like that's not like you get to a certain point where you're not just gonna go on stage and like start having flop sweats and a panic attack. Kind of shit. But it's always like there's always a new challenge. There's always gonna be that night where it just wasn't what you expected to be. Like you, like I think you were there too. We did that show over at what was the name of that place? Anyways, it wasn't fun. Like, it was in Kernersville, some brewery. Yeah. We were doing that show that the Idiot Box had put together.
It was fun, yeah.
Wicked
and but
brewery.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I mean, we're not plugging that place. Screw them. That was a dirt bag show, anyways. No, it wasn't. It was the show was fine and all, but the audience was cold. It was windy.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was like the sun was blinding half the audience for the first half of the show. It wasn't ideal conditions. So none of us, I feel like, did that show and afterwards were like, this is why I do comedy. Like, it was fine, but like you walk off a set like that and you're like, oh wow, that was just autopilot the whole time.
I had a lot of fun with it, but that was only my like second or third show.
Like how many sets have you done where you got to do that much time?
Well, 5 minutes. I've done several.
Oh, you only did 5 on that?
Yeah.
Why did I think you did longer?
I was just a guest. So,
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I write a lot, so I've got a lot.
It felt long because it was cold as fuck.
That might
true.
honestly, that's probably part of it. That and his jokes, but like it was both. But no, like you had a good set. Like so,
Thanks,
how many sets have you done now?
I've done several sets at mics, open mics,
right.
But
I've
like
done actual show sets.
I think I've done like 2 or 3 showcases and 3 shows, and I just did the UCC.
How'd that go?
Went good. I passed the first level.
Rocked on. Yeah, that's as far as comedy contests go, that's one of the better ones. but they're all bullshit. Like, they're terrible. They're not. I mean, Jenny has made special effort to make sure it's not as easy to win the whole thing by bringing the most people and all that kind of stuff. But it's still, to some extent, you can kind of rig the thing. And like, there used to be this contest, like North Carolina's Funniest, that this club called DSI in Chapel Hill did for years. And this lady who had never done comedy before came in. Like, I don't think she had a laugh ever in the entire contest and won the whole thing of North Carolina's Funniest.
That's weird.
She didn't speak great English, and like, she had but she packed the place out and straight through. I mean, there were some funny comics in that contest, and didn't matter.
I think in the UCC they only do crowd judging on the first round. I think after that it's all professional judges.
It's a mix. It's but
which I like.
But she also, even for the first round, makes it so, like, I don't know if they did it this year, but in the past what she had done is had where the comics got to push through people. If anybody got kind of shorted, all the comics also got to vote, and whoever got the top comic votes that didn't advance also advanced. So I don't know if she's still doing that, but that was what she had done in the past.
This year they just had a list of all the people who were going up, and then you just
now it sucks. Then she's gone back to a bullshit contest. Screw you, Jenny.
Yeah, you picked
I think it's good.
Top
I
four.
like it. Yeah,
you did top four.
Top four. Yeah.
I tried to be sincere with all of my votes, including Neil's. That's why I didn't vote for Neil. No, I'm just playing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the support.
I mean,
actually, I tried to legitimately vote. Like, in my head, I went through each one and tried to, like, legitimately, as I was doing it, I didn't know what to do, so I just, like, put little circles. Like, if they actually legitimately made me laugh, I did a little circle.
Yeah, and if I went up there and ate shit the whole time, I would expect people to not vote for me, even the people that were supporting me.
Right, but like, a lot of people that enter those contests bring 20 people, and they tell their friends to vote down whoever. Like, they don't usually. It's like the funniest person. Like, is kind of that person's going to get through. Whoever had the best set, but like second through fifth, they're like, "Hey man, don't vote for that guy. That guy's a dick." I'm just telling y'all, he's kind of an asshole. Like, even if he's funny, he's a dick, and you'll see it happen all the time.
Well, that's anything though. There's so many things in life that are subjective.
Everything's bullshit, so.
Right? Well, to an extent, for sure.
But I try to do that. If they legitimately made me laugh, I just try to come up with some type of check system and go through it. And I don't know. There was actually some good stuff.
Yeah, it was fun. It was good. The night that I went up, it was good. We had a lot of good comics. It was fun. And we had a good audience too. So it was. I mean, it was a little bit. The audience was good, but they were a little bit reserved. It's like they were a polite audience. Like, their laughs were more controlled.
Yeah. Well,
but it was good. It was fun though.
That can be demographics.
Oh,
that
sure.
Can be
that happens.
The age of the audience, and so a lot of times, especially at a bringer contest like that, the audience members, a lot of them have never seen live comedy, and people who go see live comedy a lot. If any of you guys, I don't know if you guys ever spent a whole lot of time at the Comedy Zone here, back when it used to stay packed out all the time.
I've been there several times in the past,
But people who go to comedy shows regularly go, one, because they have such a good time, and it's usually because they're like laughers, and when something makes them giggle, they make noise. Like, it's and so you sort of get trained to be a comedy audience. That's why if you go to the Midwest, where comedy is a thing people do, like as a go out on Friday night kind of thing. Like in the South, it's partially because people don't drink as much, but also just because there aren't as many comedy venues.
Yeah. When
people talk about what you're going to do on Friday, like, I don't know, we could go to a movie, we could have dinner. Well, in the Midwest, because there's so many comedy venues and it's so much a part of the culture, going to see a comedy show is on that list.
Interesting.
So so one, the crowds are better, they're bigger, and they're better trained. So you can have what would be your best set ever here, there, and
just crush it.
It's like, it's just not, like, those audiences are so good that you'll think you're killing it, even when to them you're just doing all right.
Oh, okay.
So it's almost, it feels like almost a cheat code. Like, I don't understand why anybody records comedy albums in the South. So.
Yeah, for me, and limited experience, but I've had some really good sets with regular audiences, and it's that first joke, if it hits good, and they really react, it's like something happens, like in your brain, like you connect to this audience, and then you're just on this ride with them, and it's
all in your brain.
Fun, man.
It's all in your brain. Because the thing, you'll notice this: if you watch a comic go on stage and their first couple of jokes don't work, a little energy comes out of them. And when the energy comes out of the comic, it comes out of the crowd.
Yeah.
And down and down. And I'm not talking about like big over the top performer comics. Even just when people are having a regular conversation. Like if we were talking right here and every time I said something, you guys were like, I don't know, man, that sounds like bullshit. Like eventually I'd be over here being like, well, yeah, so that happens to comics. It's all psychological. But you see dudes that go on stage and there's just never an ounce of fear. It doesn't matter what the crowd's doing.
Yeah.
Those guys tend to do better just because it doesn't but even the most like hardcore, I've been doing this for 20 years guys, like you can still see it a little bit usually.
Yeah, I think that's one of the advantages coming from acting. You have less nerves on stage.
Yeah.
I mean, I still get nervous, but it's like I can make it more of a positive thing.
Yeah.
Like it's excitement, it's not just fear.
Well, yeah. Well,
it's more excitement than it's like nervous excitement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even I'm almost 12 years into doing comedy at this point, and there are shows where just if too many of my friends are there, I'm still going to walk out being like, oh, man, I hope this doesn't suck.
It is easier with people you don't know, right?
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Because then they're just, it's the same reason we can watch, Indonesia get carpet bombed and be like, it's like they're strangers. They don't mean as much.
Right. Yeah. There's probably something to that. Yeah. And, but it's, I think, comedy's also, it's like watching empathy happen too. Because you've got your mirror neurons in your brain and you're syncing up with other people and relating. Even if you disagree on things, if you can sync up with people, you have a good time.
Yeah. There's also a hypnosis to it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think everybody always gets that. But like if you get a comedy crowd where they're just really packed in tight together and there are just a handful of big laughers sitting up front. Like some comedy clubs even try to seat it that way. Like if they see like a group of, girls coming in together, not like some clubs do bachelor parties, which kills the show. But if like just a high energy group of people coming in, they'll sit them up front just because their laughter spreads out.
Right.
And once everybody gets past their own, because the audience is nervous a little too.
Yeah.
They're nervous for the comic. They're nervous for themselves. They're insecure. Like some people don't want to laugh out loud because they don't want people to look at them.
Yeah, that's why it's dark, right?
But and so like the more the laughter happens, the more people feel free to actually join in and laugh. Yeah. And you can see what was like some comics are better at this than others, but you can go to a show where you'll see like 3 comics in a row just eat it, and then the audience is like, it feels like they're tight, and then one guy just walks on and is like, so who wants to fuck Martha Stewart? And all of a sudden the crowd just goes, ah! And it turns into all of a sudden it turns into a comedy show. But
yeah. It's like a manipulation of tribalism.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. I'm sure that everything stopped, last year with COVID, but what?
No, not for me. No. Like I'm like a hardcore liberal, so I was doing like Illuminati shows and stuff. Like I've been writing jokes for Bill Gates. It was great. Like, I bought an island in the Bahamas. I got rich this year.
It was a great year to do a lot of creative work, though. It was a good year to write. Well, for me it was good because I'm just starting, so for me it was like really tough open mics with like 8 comics,
right? Yeah.
And so it was kind of like just a really difficult class on comedy, which was great.
For me, it was the opposite of that. I mean, because I've been doing it for a while, where I most of what we're gonna write is gonna be our daily life. You go out in the world, and there's stimulus that happens, and from that, you say something funny, it makes you like whatever. However, the creative process works,
right.
It needs input for there to be output.
Yes, yeah.
And over the last year, there's been I probably could have written a hot 10 on how obnoxious my kids are, and I did. But like other than that, it's like unless you just want to sit there and everything's about some shit you saw on the news, it's pretty.
What's your I want to get onto your shows too, but what's your creative process since you brought it up?
It varies. Like sometimes it's just the notebook. I heard very early on in comedy, if you say something and it makes people laugh, remember that, or write it down, and that's usually going to be able to turn into a punchline and an actual joke, that kind of thing. So I try to keep track of that kind of stuff. But I have gotten over the last few years where for me, it's not the most efficient way, but I have an idea, I go on stage, and I just ramble about it. And because I've been doing this long enough, I know the cadence, I know timing. Like, I know how to, even without something that's funny, I still know how to make a crowd laugh. I can still, I know the tricks. So I just sort of go on stage and like work it out where it's like a lot of the punchlines come on stage. It's a lot of riffing and playing around. Okay. And I mean, some of my favorite bits weren't even something that I thought about in advance. I was just on stage and something came up and it just sort of evolved from there. And then there's other stuff I have that is just like tightly scripted word for word. This is exactly what it is because that's the way I wrote it, and I've been too lazy to tighten it up. So But those jokes for me at this point work way less than the stuff that comes from riffing on stage. Right. Like I'm better at comedy than I was when I wrote some of the jokes that I'll do when I got to do like an hour or whatever.
Oh, so. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, I know, like, every time I go up, I learn something new, like something something new clicks. It's like you're adding a layer.
Beauty of it,
it's fun. And, but yes, so I'm getting better at figuring out things on stage. Like I'll write down, because I'm more of a writer, so I write out my sets, and then I like to be
everybody should be at the beginning, by the way. Like everybody at the beginning. Like even like people who've done a lot of improv. Yeah. Once you start doing stand up, you got to learn how to structure a joke. Like I spent years learning how to write jokes so that now I can go on stage and write them in real time. And now you
think in that type of pattern, which I've seen with a lot of the
trendy.
Yeah, like a lot of the better comics, you guys you sort of like have trained your mind to think in a punchline way.
It's just short, tight sentences. Yeah, it's a complete.
But it's also the order of the sentence too, and
I mean it is, but it's the thing that separates 95% of comics their first 3 or 4 years from comics that have been doing it for a while is it really is. You got to have a lot of periods and not so many commas.
Right. Yeah.
And it really does come down to that. It's that short, tight sentences, bam, 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 and then once you get them laughing, keep them laughing. Yeah. You go from 7-word sentences to once they start laughing, you're looking at 3-4-word sentences, bam, 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 and that's the difference between somebody that's like, wow, that was a good set, and somebody that just burns a room down,
just destroys it. Yeah. Like when I write now, like what I've started doing is when I write up my bits or my sets, I'll try to make sure that I have a laugh every couple sentences or sentence. That way I've got all these breaks and I can see it on the page where the laugh should be. And then also what I've done is like I'll have an idea. Like I might just go up tonight. I'll have an idea before the show, and it just fits into that set somehow. And I'll throw it in as a tag and see if it works. And then I'll go back and write that into my set. And sometimes you get like this joke, and it'll have like maybe 3 tags on it, and that's when it gets fun.
Yeah, that's when you're actually starting to really make some moves with the crowd, because it's also easier once you get it going. Right. Because if you have to stop and restart with every joke, where it's literally, and then she and I went to da-da, and you got to blah, blah, blah.
Losing energy.
Punchline. It's when you can get it rolling and rolling and rolling like that, it just gets easier.
Yeah. It seems weird, like doing the same set over and over at these open mics. Yeah. But I see the benefit in it now, because now I've got a couple of bits I can do, and just you do them effortlessly. And that's when also like I'll have new ideas because I know the material so well. Right. I'm not thinking about it, and then something else will maybe pop up and just happen, and I'm like, oh, that was awesome, like that.
Well, it's when you're really grooving, you're doing the show. And then you're doing like there's a whole other thing going on in your head. Yeah. And there's the show that's happening, and there's the performance side of it.
And you're watching all these people.
Yeah, and you're also reading the room, and you're thinking about, oh man, that chick's got big tits. Like it's like once you can really get that flow going, where you're not having to overthink it, and you're not nervous, and you're not worried, and if a joke doesn't hit. Like, especially early on when you don't have a lot of jokes. Yeah. If you do a joke and it doesn't hit, you're like, oh, God, I only got 3 more potential punchlines for the rest of this 5 minutes. Fuck! And you start freaking out. But when you know it doesn't matter if a joke works or not, because I got 8 more that are going to work, it's just easier. It's easier to be more confident on stage. It's easier to be more free on stage.
Yeah.
And like I did a show in Wilmington where I don't know, I was closing out the show and there was a bunch of other comics on the show, so I wasn't doing a full hour. But I don't know, I did 30, 45 minutes, however long it was. I didn't even really pay attention.
Yeah.
But I only did like 3 or 4 bits, and the rest was just playing.
Right.
You know, and those kinds of shows now for me are way more fun than the going on stage and just sticking with the script kind of stuff. Like I'd rather but and I usually don't get political on stage, but on that show I was just like there was this one dude up front that was like super Trumpy. Like I don't care if you're Trumpy, but this guy was like super Trumpy, and the rest of the crowd wasn't. So I just started laying in the dial. I was like, dude, you know, we knew Biden had dementia too, right? We still voted for him because your guy was that shitty. And so just playing around and having fun with it. And
it's like a sacrificial lamb.
Yeah. But it was like he kept throwing the softball.
Oh, okay. Oh, the guy was heckling you?
Well, like not even so much heckling. Like he would just be like, that ain't right. Like that kind of stuff.
Well, that's heckling. Yeah.
And I mean, it is.
For me, it would be. I'm sure for you don't even care. But
I don't know. Like I've never had real issues with a chatty crowd because one, I don't know if it's just because my voice, whatever it is, I don't get heckled.
Yeah.
Really, almost ever.
Yeah.
Like you see comics where their whole thing is like dealing like,
well,
you crushed a heckler kind of thing. Where
you look really relatable too, though.
I mean, maybe that might be it too.
Yeah.
But
you look like you should be a Republican, by the way.
Well, yeah, that's the dirty trick, man. I'm white trash Serpico, bro. Like that's who I am. Like this does not look like tolerance. I know. but that's kind of that's a lot of what my comedy is at this point too. Is talking about the fact that like one, I got to work extra hard to sort of prove my wokeness bona fides. And like now it's even after working out all that stuff, now there's even more stuff about like, you guys know at any point I can just be like, yeah, fuck it, Trump's right. Like you guys should appreciate me more. Like I'm tired of being treated like my voice doesn't matter. I could just go vote for the other guy and everyone would be like, that makes sense. Like it's
That's funny.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know. How about you? What are you into? You're too quiet.
He's tired.
Yeah, I don't want to give you an excuse. Tired works. I'm working through it over here. I've had about 300 milligrams of caffeine. I'm wondering when it's going to kick in.
All right. What time did you go to bed last night?
Oh, I went to bed halfway early.
You're struggling with allergies, right?
Yeah. So what happened is the night before I went to bed about 4 a.m., but which is common, 3 or 4 a.m. But I actually went to bed early last night. But what happened is I left my Claritin, and like a dumb fuck, I never stopped and got Claritin. Left it in Florida, and I was like, oh, it'll be fine for 3 or 4 days without it. I'm going back to Florida tonight. And so I didn't use Claritin. So last night, I wear a CPAP to sleep.
Yeah.
So last night, I was so congested, I literally kept waking up. And so I'm running, like nasal spray and stuff. But my CPAP, can't get air through your nose.
God, we're fucking old, aren't we?
Yeah, you can't breathe. So
you remember when somebody's story about why they were tired was like, I did like 2 balls last night, and like, dude, there's 3 strippers. Like, I'm sorry, like I want this to be a party right now, but like, oh my god, my dick hurts. Like, those were the stories, and now we're just like, well, I forgot my Claritin,
my CPAP, I'm not breathing. But yeah, so I basically woke up over and over and over all night last night, and I'm like, what the fuck. So I'd rather have 2.5, 3 hours of sleep with my CPAP on and be fresh than 10 hours of sleep without it. And
so
basically,
you're just old, is what you're telling me.
Yeah,
I'm just an old fuck now.
The cocaine and hookers and strippers and everything, that was the night before, so I had plenty of time to recover.
Well, I mean, you should always have time for cocaine and strippers. I don't care where you get to in life. Like Joe Biden should have cocaine and strippers in the White House.
We know his son does.
Well, damn right he does. Where do you think the boy learned it? Like he's a chip off the old cock. Like it's.
I like it. Yeah.
You can't be stable if you're the son of a politician anyway.
I mean, you can be, but then you probably suck.
That's true. Yeah.
Like it's like the thing is whether you're a liberal or you're conservative. Bottom line is, if we're at a party and like Don Jr.'s there or Hunter Biden's there, we're like, fuck yeah, now it's a party. Like it's like, I don't give a shit about that man. We're all we all have our white privilege and all that. We can set all that stuff aside when we're all at the same party and have a good time.
I've partied with many people, and I got to tell you, over the years, political differences have never meant more to me in my entire life than the last, 12, 18 months. Probably 18 months, 36 months, probably more accurate. But prior to that, I didn't know.
You didn't have to.
You know,
I mean, I know it's silly, but there is, even if you're not liberal, even if you're more conservative, there is something to the idea of white privilege. There really is, because the bottom line is, I grew up like poor white trash, like super poor white trash. So my parents had the talk with me about the cops, but it was also like, but you know, if you show them some respect, they probably gonna let you walk, which was true. Like, I did so many crimes when I was young, and I got away with all of it, and I got caught. It's not like I was some genius criminal.
Right.
Like when I broke into a bunch of storage buildings, I got busted, but then I didn't get prosecuted for it because they were like, well, he's a good boy. He's a good boy. So, there's the only reason I'm not a felon is because, my dad was a truck driver, and they're like, we know his dad's over the road. It's like so many excuses were granted to me.
There's a lot of that.
Only because I was a goofy white kid that so many of my friends that weren't goofy white kids, fucking 3 felonies, drug convictions, all that kind of shit. I literally, at 19, I told the cop to go fuck himself in every way possible on the side of the road, just yelling at the motherfucker. And all he did was go, you need to learn how to talk to other people. I didn't get slammed to the ground, nothing. And now, like, as a middle-aged white dude, I don't even look for speed limit signs anymore. They're not fucking with me. So there is privilege to it, so there's so many things we don't have to think about, like what's going on with Israel and Palestine. A few of my friends that are Muslim they're pretty upset, and a few of my friends that are Jewish, they're also upset. Yeah. And they're having these really deep, detailed conversations about what's going on over there, and they're thoughtful and they're well informed. And I'm just like, well, I just don't think folks should get killed. I don't have to know. Like, I have no reason to know, other than the fact that I should, because I want to be a informed citizen, but I don't. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think one part of a lot of the turmoil in our country is, first off, human civilization is the best it's ever been.
Right.
And we're so connected now. We see everything. So which is great. That's why we're solving problems. But it's easy to think that things are worse today. Like people say, I wish it was like it was 20 years ago. And no, we don't, because it was worse. There was more crime. There was more.
Oh yeah, like the
everything.
90s,
more violence, more racism, more everything. It was. But
now it's just on tape.
If you look, now you just see. You see everything that happens, and it's going to get more and more, which is great. That increases empathy. Once the more we get connected, but
that is true. Everything you're saying is true. But there also has been a legitimate change over the last 25 years in the way that police operate. Genuinely there is.
That's true. It's more militarized.
One, it's more militarized. And two, police officers are trained to make as many stops as possible. They're trained to, it's called go beyond the stop. Where
it's like a taxing thing.
Right, where it's not just taxing, it's an investigative practice where traffic stops, police officers all the way up until the early 90s were trained on traffic stops that the idea is you pull over if they're speeding, but now police officers are trained to, when they walk up to the car, look in the back seat. If there's too much trash, ask yourself the question, why haven't they had it? Like, are they afraid to walk away from their car? This could be a suspicious vehicle. Is the mileage really high on the car? If they say they're going somewhere and they don't have any luggage. Like, these are things that police officers were never trained with. So now they're overthinking what should be a seatbelt ticket. They're pulling people over. If you look at the Sandra Bland case, and I'm not even trying to get into the details of all that, but like if you go in and honestly read what the officer said about why he pulled her over, like he sped up behind her because he saw her roll through a stoplight on a college campus where he couldn't pull her. It wasn't his jurisdiction. And so he saw her do that, and he just kept following her. And he rolled up behind her. She merged over, and he pulled her over because she didn't signal. But she only merged over because a cop came flying up behind her. And she thought, and everybody thinks that's what you do when you see a cop coming up. And so those are the kinds of things that police officers weren't trained to do. Yeah. Where now that is the way they're taught. And that's where a lot of the tension comes from.
Well, a lot of that's driven by the drug war too, which is nonsense. It's just a tax.
Absolutely.
It just enslaves people for nothing, for victimless crimes. All the countries that have decriminalized drugs and even regulated them and made them safe to use have had incredible outcomes from that. Their drug use has dropped, their crime has dropped drastically. But it's crime is a probably $1 trillion business.
Well,
like war, it's the same type of thing.
But if you look at what's happened in like the way crime has dropped, and it's
nonviolent crime, that is.
No, like nonviolent crime in the United States is just almost nothing compared to what it was even in the mid 90s. Like the murder rates and they're high in Chicago right now, but they're still like 20% of what they were in the 90s. Where New York, it's like 5-10% of what it was. Yeah. There are considerable improvements, but there's also been a cost that's come with that. And there needs to be, by police, to me, a recognition of, yes, some of the new techniques that they've used are beneficial, and they have gotten some violent offenders off the street, but also there's a general public that has a backlash from that as well that also needs to be addressed. And you can't make a bigger problem with your solution. And that's kind of what's happened in the last.
Yeah, I think the police should never look like a military.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, do they need tanks? No. But if they got them, they want to use them.
Because they're dealing with civilians, not insurgents.
Yeah.
But,
well, see, I'm capitalist through and through, and I got to tell you, to me, the police are doing their job is to create revenue and tax, and a DA's job is to prosecute what the police and sheriffs bring to them, right? So, like, they're all part of a system. Their job is literally, as an adversary to me, I can respect them, I can appreciate them, and I can do it, but I can also shut the fuck up when I get pulled over and not say anything. I don't have to answer any of those questions. I don't have to tell them why I was trashing my back seat. I don't have to tell them where I'm going.
Right, that's true, but
I can be respectful while I do it.
But there's also the reality. There is the reality of when you or me or you opt to not answer those questions, in a lot of cases, we can not answer those questions and probably drive away. Right. Maybe we'll get the ticket instead of the warning we were going to get, but we're probably not going to get pulled out of the car. We're probably when we were teenagers. When we were teenagers, it was different.
I've been pulled out. I've been arrested.
Me too. I mean, I've had a gun put a gun to my head before, but I was also committing a felony. So
well, most of mine was because I was being disrespectful when I was younger.
Right.
So that's why I say, like you said, your experience was you went off on a cop and you said you shouldn't do that. I have also went off on police officers, and they didn't deserve it. I was just young and stupid.
Right.
And I did get slammed, and I did get arrested.
Right.
And I did have my father have to come get me out. Like, I've been through all that. So, like, I get your experience is unique to you. I experienced something completely different. Grew up very poor, military bases. I was the minority on the military base.
There's a difference between the treatment that a late teen, early 20s white kid gets, which is treated the same way that versus the way that our middle-aged treatment, the way police are going to talk to you right now.
Sure.
The way they're going to talk to you, the way they're going to talk to me, the way they're going to treat us is very different than the way, and it's not even so much, I don't think it's like overt racism. It's not.
It is disproportionate, though, and that's a problem. But I think, the biggest problem in our society is not necessarily racism, but it's poverty. And we shouldn't have poverty in this country, and we don't have to. We have plenty of resources. But we talk about this all the time about our currency is valued improperly. We don't base any of the value of our currency on the population, on the people, which is the society. So you have to base. So currency is not a real thing. It's a social construct.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And if you want to have a successful society, you have to have healthy people. You have to have a healthy society. So there's no reason we can't just say, okay, well, if you take an individual and you say, okay, it takes this much money to meet this person, meet a standard person's basic needs throughout a lifetime, and we add that into the equation of the value of the currency, you suddenly have enough money to have a healthy society. And you have to set it up where people are still motivated and there's still incentive to do things. You can't just give people money for nothing. But what you can do is you can say, if you're in an entry-level job, say you're a janitor. I've used this example before, but you're a janitor, and you make today, maybe that janitor makes $10 an hour, which is not really enough to survive.
No, it's not,
because he or she would have to have probably multiple jobs to survive. But you say, okay, well, if we change the construct that way, where we reevaluated the value of the currency. Because right now, you take all the currency in the U.S. and divide it amongst all the people, there's not enough money. And that's why we're constantly going further and further in debt. So if you say a large portion of the value of our currency is not just based on GDP and banks and businesses and the stock market, but it's also based on people's basic human needs, including inflation, accounting for inflation over the years, and also new people.
Right.
So your currency is constantly evaluated to meet the needs of your society, and we all agree as a society to say if you make under a certain amount of money, we agree to subsidize those people. And so then that well, not really.
Oh, yeah, we do. Food stamps and housing, like Walmart would be out of business if the government didn't subsidize.
We do, but it's not enough.
Oh, no, it's not. But
and so if you have that janitorial job and you're making $10 an hour, suddenly that person's making $30, $40 an hour, and they're working 40 hours a week. So they have their 40 hours a week. Maybe they hate their job, but they don't hate it as much now. They're getting paid, compensated well for this job. So now they don't mind the job, and they have all this extra time after work to work on other things they want to do, because they're not just trying to survive and feed their family or just eat. You know, they actually have their health care. They have all their basic needs are met. They have a decent place to live. Then you have a more productive society. It's just like having free education. It makes more sense to have, the healthier your society, the more successful your society.
Right.
And you can just see that by the data. That's why societies get better, because over the past 20 years, poverty has decreased by 50% globally. And that's why the whole world is doing a little better every decade. And with technology, which is exponential, the next 10 years is not going to be like the last 10 years. It might be like 200 years in advancement. So things are going to change dramatically.
Right.
So these honestly, most entry-level jobs in the next 10 or 20 years will be completely gone.
Well, but what you're describing as a system doesn't have, you can't extract the political will of the country from the concept. That's one of the problems we see with a lot of politics is everything you just described in theory is great, but we also have, 100 years of deep economic study and research about how to make our capitalistic system work. And some of that, turns into goofy libertarianism, and some of that turns into goofy wanting to be full-on socialist and all that. But the bottom line, when it comes down to the way our economic system is structured, is we know basically how to maintain some level of stability to our currency. If we start changing that, there is a very, very real chance that it's going to bring up completely unintended consequences.
I disagree.
You're smart, but you're not smart enough to understand the economics of 330 million people.
Yeah, but some of the people I follow are.
No, they're not.
Like Peter Diamandis. And
nobody's smart enough to do that.
Well, listen.
There is a benefit to capitalism. There really is.
I'm not against capitalism. I like capitalism. But I think that our current structure is broken, and it's not. I don't have a problem with capitalism. I don't have a problem with having an infinitely high ceiling. Like, you should be able to do as well as you want to do, and you should be able to continue to grow and prosper. That's great, but we should be able to raise the floor to a certain level where we all have the same opportunity to do that. If you want to stay at the floor level and just have your basic needs and have a decent life, that's fine. But if you want to, maybe you want to pursue art or something creative.
Who decides that dollar amount?
We would decide as a society.
That's not how it works.
No, that's how it is.
It is not how it works.
No, that's how it all works. It's all a social construct. None of it.
Right.
It is all what we agree, and that's.
But it's not what we.
So
all
right
agree,
now,
because we don't agree.
Yeah, but right now,
like as a society on anything,
most politics is based on corporations, right or left.
Right, of course.
It's all driven by the biggest corporations that spend the most money in politics, and that's changing because of knowledge and information. But it is. Everything is based on what we agree. You're seeing it with Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies, because people are saying, okay, well, we're going to agree that this is valuable when it has no real, like Dogecoin, has no value, no purpose. It doesn't do anything. It was a joke.
Everything is a social construct, though, Dan. That's the thing you got to keep in mind. Gold itself only has value because it's a shiny rock.
That's the beauty.
All of it is made up. There's only a handful of scientific uses and effective cultural uses for gold, other than as a currency. It's a good it conducts it's a good, well, not, it isn't a good conductor, so it's a good shield, like those kinds of things. So like the reason we value things are all socially constructed, whether it's
100%.
diamonds, whether it's gold. The idea of creating an entire new economic system that still functions
not entirely new.
If you're to the point where you're saying even the poorest people in America are getting $30 to $40 an hour, that's a completely new system.
If they're working,
that is more financial compensation to people than what they were even doing in communist countries. What they were doing in
but it's
the system you're describing is beyond.
It's based on your income though, and it's also basing the increase of the value of the currency on the population, which we don't do. We look at our society or the individuals in our society as liabilities when we should be looking at them as assets. And people
that's
create
such a great line to say that's blowing smoke, but it's not like our society looks at individuals as a whole as sheep. I mean, that's what everybody is.
You should read the book "The Future Is Closer Than You Think" by Peter Diamandis. It's a great book. It's brilliant, and I'm telling you that things are going to change so fundamentally in the next 10, 20 years that people are not going to understand it. It's going to be.
But that's not going to. You have to understand the political will of the American public is going to be, and it's not even the political will of the American public. It's the political will of the party that happens to win the election. Which one of the parties can have minority numbers of votes and still run the country.
Parties are a big problem.
The systems that are in place. What you'd like to do in an ideal situation sounds great. It does. But in the same way that if you completely take out any understandings of how power works or any of those kind of things, libertarianism sounds great when you extract how power works. Full-on communism sounds great until you recognize how power works. Any system that gives too much control to either government or to business is inevitably going to fail.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
But you cannot come up with a system where you're paying people beyond what a living wage would be, even if they're working full-time, without any capitalistic incentives built into it, unless you want the system to collapse.
There are capitalistic incentives. That's the point.
But most of the population, of course, there's always going to be the overachievers. But
if we evaluated our currency and reevaluated the currency and changed the value of the currency, we would have more than enough. And 100 years ago, this wouldn't work because we didn't have the resources to meet the demand of the people.
That's never going to happen.
Oh, it'll happen.
It absolutely cannot happen.
Either it will happen, or we will. Our society will collapse because it's fundamentally broken right now. It cannot continue the way it is.
But it's not. It's actually better now than it's ever been.
It is, but
it's not fundamentally
when all these entry level jobs are gone. What do? You have a massive,
of course, yeah, no, like, dude, I've been reading Marx my whole life. I'm way far, like
it's not socialism though.
It is.
Socialism doesn't work. This is not socialism. This is
literally cannot describe and again,
here's the difference. You're not right now. We don't have enough monetary resource to meet the demands of the people, and you have 85% of Americans hate their jobs because they're underpaid,
right?
And they don't have enough money to meet their basic needs. We solved that problem in a way that still provides incentive, and it's still based on a capitalist marketplace.
But you're just describing what we do now. Between HUD, between food stamps, between literally
not to the level we need to do it though.
Well, I know, I agree with that. I do agree with that.
But we can't do it to that level with the current monetary system we have. There's not enough money.
But there's never.
You can take all the money from all the billionaires. There's still not enough money.
I mean, or you can reverse inflation, or you can increase inflation, or there's still world debt that we have to deal with.
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you change the evaluation of the currency, you do decrease inflation.
Right, but the idea of if we actually reversed inflation, we would have a massive problem because suddenly the debt that we owe to China would be so much more of our GDP than it is now. You can't just examine this within the way it works.
Not if you reevaluate the currency, because then you have way more.
But then you have what China's doing. Like
no, China's communist. That's a different thing.
No, but China
owns everything.
Their own manipulation of the value of their currency and not having it based on markets is the reason that they have the system that they have that's not working.
Yeah, you have to base the money on something.
Right.
But China's system works for them, but it's not a good system. It doesn't work for their people. It works for the government.
Well, I mean, every system works for the government.
Sure. Yeah,
I mean, there's literally no system that if you've got the power, it works for you.
Right. This one's better for the people than China's, but yeah.
But again, there are any argument that you make, if you can't make it in a way that's sellable to if you're selling it to conservatives, it needs to be 45%. If you're selling it to liberals, it needs to be about 52%. If you can't form an argument that is easily sellable to those people, then there's no solution.
I think it's easily sellable eventually. I think technology helps with that. I think the more connected we are, the more we have understanding of these things, the easy. I think some of this stuff will just self-correct itself. It's self-correcting. But so that's the problem with political parties. It keeps people against each other. I'm an independent.
Constitution?
George Washington didn't like political parties.
Right, yeah, that's
fine. You don't have to have political parties in the Constitution.
The Founding Fathers weren't actually all that smart. They didn't create a system that allows for multiple parties. You can only have two functional parties.
No, you should have one party. There shouldn't be political parties.
Well, then you're communist.
No.
You're literally describing a system that can't exist.
No, it shouldn't be a party. It should be politicians, and they run on their ideas. When you have parties,
that's not how power works, man.
But that's the
people will always organize.
The people
will always organize and form parties.
The power should belong to the people, and I think
it does here more than anywhere else in the world already.
Sure, and I think we're in a weird space right now.
Why do I sound like the Republican in this conversation?
But I think
actually, I'm sitting here like, this is not what I expected James to say.
Right.
But I think as we progress,
I'm super pro-capitalist. I just also believe in a support structure and a safety net. I believe in a safety net. I don't believe.
What's funny is I agree with you.
Right.
And that's funny to me because with some of the things that you write, I'm like, I don't know.
But again, when it comes to the economics of the world, I am hugely in favor of capitalism, but I am also hugely in favor of a system that approaches some of what you're talking about, but also maintains structurally an electable system. And by an electable system, I mean a system that people will actually go out and vote for. We have convinced, literally right now, about 40% of our country doesn't even believe our election was real.
That's true.
And you're talking about wanting to make a fundamental change that 40% of the people automatically won't support because one party's just going to go like, no, that's communism. They're just going to call it communism.
Both parties won't like this because politicians like power.
Then it would never work.
But it will work because politicians are getting less and less powerful because they can't lie.
Yes, they can.
They can.
We just had a president for 4 years that lied every day.
But it's a lot easier for us to pick out their
Bill
lies.
Clinton lied every day.
But the more advanced our technology gets, the easier it is for us to see through the bullshit. But
the people granting him power ignore the bullshit.
Well, sort of. And part of that's the.
I agree with that. Against
and that's
Trump,
both. It's both sides. It's not one side or the other.
Everybody.
Like both sides are completely full
Part
of
of
shit.
that's because of our preliminary election system too, because it's creating politicians that are so far apart instead of people that are closer to the middle that can actually work together.
Of course, but again, we have a constitution that has a system set up in place.
Right, and it's a pretty good one.
We're not England. We don't have a parliamentary system where we have a prime minister that is picked out of the actual majority. Our system doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Because our primary leader is elected independently. Because of that system, it's impossible to have more than two functional parties because if a third party comes up, it's going to hurt its side more than the other side, and you're actually giving, say a really strong moderate to left party came along, and even if 45% of the Americans were voting for, or 40% were voting for the Democrats, and then the moderate left party got its own 9% of the vote, then the Republicans with 41%, with the minority still get the power.
And you still need...
there's no way to correct that with our system, so we have to have a two-party system.
Maybe so, but you have to have conservatives and liberals because there has to be a balance.
Right.
Because each are good at different things.
Right.
So they each have
the problem
their own
is that
strengths.
the parties are now being a conservative and liberal instead of the parties having both in each.
And they shouldn't be looked at as teams. We're all the same team. We all need.
We're not.
Well, we should be,
but we're not.
But
that's a great idea. You're right.
But we should be though. Yes, I agree.
In
we're not.
In theory, everything you're saying is right, but it's also the political reality.
But if you go to the base of the population, just no politicians included, just the people in the population, most people want similar things. They want to have a decent place to live. They want to have food to eat. They want to be able to feed their family. They want to be able to have their kids go to school. It's not a lot that people need to be okay.
What most people want is what they see someone else
and they want to be loved.
That's why capitalism works.
Yeah.
What people want.
You need incentive for sure.
What people want is whatever he has, I want that.
A lot of people don't want a lot of people aren't super ambitious. I'm a really ambitious person, but a lot of people
want it.
aren't.
They may not want to work for it.
But again, they
and you have to have incentive.
Want it, and there is always resentment, and there will always be. That's how see any political system that anyone comes up with, any economic system, any social system that doesn't recognize how power works and how those with power use it to manipulate, and those who without power use it to gain for themselves regardless, even though they don't have power. Any system that doesn't recognize that, and that's why our system does work, is because even though we don't consciously talk about it, it does work it into the system. Part of that is through our primary system, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'm not a huge fan of the way the Electoral College works, but there are benefits to the way it works that in the long run does keep everything to some level of balance.
Yeah. Well, power is also accomplished by weakening your population. So if you can take away the opportunities, it's a lot easier to control the people. What I'm talking about is fundamentally changing our structure where everybody has the opportunity. And I'm not saying taking from the wealthy and giving to the poor. That doesn't work.
You're saying print more and hand it out.
No, I'm not. I'm saying reevaluate the currency. We base it on the wrong things. The currency is valued based on certain things. It's based on businesses and GDP and stuff like that.
Well, but the currency is evaluated based on what the market says it's worth.
Yeah.
And
it's a lot of it's the inflated.
If you take away the market's ability to determine the value of currency, then U.S. currency stops being the currency of the world.
Keep all that stuff in there, but also add value based on the population of the society.
You can't add value to the currency that way.
Sure you can. It's a social construct. We have to just agree that each person is worth such amount of money.
Nobody worth $1 billion is going to agree to that, though.
Why? They'd have more money.
No, they wouldn't.
Yes, they would. Because if the currency increases in value, I've got more money.
But you cannot.
He's got more money.
But you cannot reverse. You can't. Inflation is built into our economic system. You cannot backtrack it.
Why?
Okay.
Why not?
The way we paid off World War II wasn't. Well, one, there was an economic boom, but most of it was inflation. We built up a massive amount of debt, and the way we were able to pay off that debt was our currency devalued. And then that debt was way less of our GDP because of inflation.
But what's your currency? Why was the currency worth what it was worth?
It was worth what it was worth because that was what the market determined it to be.
The market, right?
Right.
So let's add another element to the market. Let's add the population itself.
But if that element was going to be added, it would have been added organically already.
Not true. Why do you think Bitcoin's worth so much money?
Bitcoin's worth so much money because people are talking about it.
Exactly.
People are inflating its value.
Right.
It's not worth anything.
No, it's worth a lot.
It's not.
It's worth $60,000 a coin. That's a lot of money.
But $1's not worth anything either.
Exactly. But
if I unplug your computer or if I burn your wallet, money's worthless.
It's all digital. It's all a social construct. Right. We can change the way we look at it and make it worth more.
What system are you going to put in place that actually educates the American people to believe in the system that you're talking about?
Well, go back 200 years, and you take somebody from 200 years ago and bring them here today.
Right.
You'd blow their fucking mind.
Yeah, they'd all shoot themselves because they're afraid of the talking screens. Yeah.
But things things advance and change. We can change. Everything can be changed.
And again, what you're talking
for the
about,
worse or for the better.
I'm a big fan of Star Trek too. Like I've seen your system. Like it works in 300 years. But as long as there is a concept of scarcity among people, you are not going to eliminate the power dynamic.
That's the key. And we have the resources to make this type of structure work.
We can print the dollars, but we don't have unlimited food.
No, but
we don't have unlimited clothing.
No, but we
don't have. Scarcity does exist.
Poor people in America throw food away still.
Right.
We have the resources to meet the demand, and actually, with our
technology,
technology,
because we give them food stamps.
But even with our technology, we're solving a lot of these problems with having the amount of resources we need to feed the world and stuff. We've got it. We're right there at it.
No, we don't.
It's happening, man.
We don't have the resources right now to feed the world.
And in our country, we certainly have the resources to not have poverty.
Right now, we have to pay farmers to not grow food in this country.
Yeah, but there's a lot of political stuff behind that too, though.
But there's also a economic incentive behind doing it.
Sure, yeah, of course, with everything. But in 10 years, they'll be growing meats in labs, and we'll be eating that cheap. You'll be buying it at the grocery store for the same price you pay for regular meat.
Except that half the country's not going to eat that for
They
15
will.
more years.
They'll eat it.
Eventually. Now, again,
They'll eat it.
Eventually,
It'll be better, and they'll eat it.
Your system, like people still don't eat veggie burgers.
Well, it's not a veggie burger. It's real meat. It's better than regular meat. Yeah.
It's according to you, until somebody. But if somebody
Well,
puts a meme on the internet
health-wise.
that says that animatronic meat causes cancer, then 80% of the people are going to be like, it might cause cancer, even though there's no evidence to back it up.
If it caused people to be gay, 80% would say that, I think.
Right, it doesn't matter.
Cancer's probably going to get about 60%
Make
opposition.
up whatever you want. If you make up a story and insert it to a new product, a large percent of the population will just suddenly believe that.
Well,
I think
a small portion of the population that's really loud will believe that. But here's the thing:
But they're not a small portion.
As we get more and more connected, we're bombarded with data. There's so much more data. There's been more data created in the past 2 years that have been created in the history of humanity. So we're not used to having all this information thrown at us constantly, and we're learning how to sift through it. But we're doing it rapidly, and younger generations are pretty good at it.
They're way better at it
because they've been raised at it.
Of course.
So you can see through the bullshit, and pretty soon your phone will just say, "Hey, these are all the studies that have been done. 96% of scientists say this. There's 4% that say this."
But you got to understand that power. Dudes like the Koch brothers, and dudes like whether it's Bezos or whichever side, or even somebody like George Soros, Murdoch, all of these people control what the algorithms tell you.
Well, so did kings, but where are they at?
Yeah, I think
there's a difference.
I think
there is a huge difference.
I think at some point you're both of you guys align in the future. It's just a question of is it 10 years from now or is it 300 years from now?
But we don't have a king because the system slowly evolved into a place where the rich ate him.
Yeah.
Sort of, but you also have more empowerment of individuals too.
No, you don't.
No, you do. Today?
Nope.
Wait,
you have no choices in this country. What are you, McDonald's or Arby's? That's not choice. That's not.
Well,
that's not a free market.
I've got a choice because if I don't like something,
corporations don't compete with each other anymore, dude. There's no such thing as choice anymore.
Sort of. I mean, in some ways, like your phone would have cost, I think, $400 million.
Right.
Right. 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. But, so technology subsidizes a lot of things.
No, their ability to sell you things through your phone is why your phone's cheap.
So, sure, yeah, and I'm okay with that.
They'd give it to you if they make so much that they'll give you the device so that you'll buy.
Yeah, it's a marketing machine.
They sell the phone at a loss, just like they do the PlayStation.
Right.
Because it's not about the phone; it's about what the phone sells.
I agree. People in power, right, are going to make decisions that keep them there, right? Like I'm a landlord and I own property, and I'm going to make decisions that keep my tenants in place, right? I agree with what you're saying. I think we both are basically saying. He's saying it's going to happen in 10 years, potentially quickly. You're saying that, maybe this future society, maybe 300 years. Over time,
150 to it. We'll all be dead.
Yeah.
And that's the reality is that.
I don't think so, because I think you're not accounting for the exponential growth of technology.
But you're not accounting for the realistic concept of how power works.
It doesn't matter.
It absolutely does.
I did make a choice, though, recently. I did. Maybe you don't think this is a choice, but you ready? And this is an exhibition of power, too. I had a neighbor that I didn't like, right? It's irritating the hell out of me. I bought his house because he was a tenant, and I evicted him. I made a choice. I eliminated the problem. And I used power and capitalism to do it.
But again, you made that choice based on a system that you don't control.
That's true.
That gave you access.
I like that, but it's the same reason that I'm going to prosper in a Democratic-ran country or a Republican one. Right. Is I figure out what the rules are, regardless of who's in power.
Yeah, and you follow them and you make them work for you.
And I make them work for me, right?
But that's how power works.
But also,
because you're intelligent enough to figure out how to make the system work for you, you're always going to land on your feet. Same with you. So, like, anybody that can see the system and go, okay, but most people don't have the energy or interest.
Yeah.
Because they want to just get by.
Here's the thing.
To figure out how this, like.
If you raise the floor in the society and you have a healthier society.
It's so much higher now than it's ever been.
It is. I agree. It's getting better regardless. But if we could, when we change the structure of the society, we have a higher floor and we don't have poverty, everyone will do better. The people at the bottom of the society, the people at the floor level, will have all their basic needs. They'll be happier people as a whole. But
you're right.
And successful people will be more successful. There's no ceiling to this thing. It'll just open up more opportunities for creativity and innovation, because there'll be a lot of brilliance gets overlooked or wasted because of a lack of opportunity. And circumstance.
Do you know one of the primary things behind why crime stats in the United States dropped?
Resources.
Well, it wasn't just resources. It was we had a system where we built projects where we crammed all the poor people into the same building.
Right.
And so in those areas, the more poor people you put together, the more crime that's going to happen, and then that crime's going to grow up exponentially.
Oh, yeah.
One of the main things we did was we broke up the public housing tower, and we introduced the HUD system, where we actually pay you to go rent a privately owned home instead of paying you to live in a government-owned building.
Yeah,
Once we broke that up, the crime started spreading out, and when the crime started spreading out, it also dissipated.
Right.
Not completely, but it reduced because you didn't concentrate it together. And criminals tend to rob the people the closest to them.
Right.
So most victims of crime are other poor people anyways.
Yeah.
So when they're spread out, when it's harder to find victims, fewer people commit the crimes. And that was all something that was done, and the far left hated the idea. The far right hated the idea. And the reason both of them hated the idea was because the right was going, you're still paying for their houses, and it's bullshit. And the left was saying, you're going to shove them in some privately owned home, and that guy's just going to throw them out. That's bullshit. But that's not what happened. What happened is our crime rates dropped in this country 90%. The quality of life for almost everyone living in publicly funded housing went through the roof, and that was all done because you bounced a moderate idea and ran with it. But it was never something that was sold to the American people.
Yeah,
it was something that was figured out in some back rooms, and they worked it out, and they cut a deal. And it was honestly Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, two of the most hated people in American history, for a lot of good reasons, stumbled into a solution that actually worked.
Well, we still have an issue with impoverished neighborhoods and communities.
But nothing like what we had in the 90s.
Sure, yeah.
It's not even close.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. But it still needs to be fixed. It's still a problem.
Of course.
And we still need to fix it. And I just don't see the current system fixing that problem.
But the current system, with a few minor tweaks to it, we're not all that far away from what Norway's doing right now. We're really not that far.
Sure.
And just for everybody, what is Norway doing? What are your references?
Norway's system is the best way I can describe it is capitalism plus. There is the government doesn't own the means of production, but the government does fund more of the means of production than what we do here. They have a system where there's still almost everything's privately owned, but through economic incentives and through things like a housing system where they actually pay you, and the home that you live in, you eventually own it, but they're still helping you pay for it. And artificially inflated wages.
We don't own our houses here either. We pay taxes on them. Well,
of course. I mean, you're not really a landlord. You're a land manager. The second the government wants your house, they're just going to take it.
Yep.
Right. If they want to put a road through there, so you feel like you own stuff, so you feel like you won. But if
they give you a little bit of control and power,
yeah, but then they can just take it. That's so it's all fake anyway. So it's all a social cut. But basically their system is a slightly more well-regulated version of what we have. And then
it's also a much smaller society.
Right, but so is California versus
California doesn't work.
California has a $75 billion budget surplus right now. Like California is working better than anywhere else in this country.
They've got 200,000 homeless people between LA and
because
San
that's
Francisco.
where you would go if you like. Let's be honest. The same reason Florida
and they have 12%, 13% taxes.
Yeah.
Income tax. That's a lot.
Yeah.
I don't think
they have a
I've got
surplus
family in California
because they have
and
the
they
highest tax
struggle,
rate.
man. It's not
That's
a good place
they
to
don't.
live.
It's a so much better place to live than here.
It's weather-wise.
I mean, but the reason there's a huge homeless population in California isn't because they're giving houses to homeless people. It's because it's easier to be homeless in 72-degree weather than it is.
Sure, and I think there's a solution to that too. But yeah,
like if you live in North Dakota and you become homeless, you go to California or you go to Florida, right? Or you're gonna die.
Yeah.
So a lot of the statistics that we can throw out to question like Texas's system. And it's funny because people don't do the math on this because California was run by Republicans for most of its history. It was only recently that the left got control. So there are all these old school Republican systems that are still in place in California. And then there's also all these new liberal ideas being pushed through. But what that actually makes is a weird kind of balance. Texas was a hardcore blue state for years. I mean, it was all built around supporting racism, but it was still... That was like the Democrats.
It was like
when the government would support your racism, people loved the government if they were racist. Like as soon as the government stepped back and said you can't be as racist, people all of a sudden went, well, I want smaller government. And so you saw Texas, but because of Texas' long system in place, then you bring in the new more right. That's part of why same with Florida. You see the way in the states that either have a long history of one and are now controlled by the other. North Carolina. Great example. This was a blue state from the end of the Civil War until the late 90s. Yeah. I mean, Jesse Helms shocked people as a Republican, being a representative.
A lot of blue dog Democrats, yeah.
I grew up in eastern North Carolina where until 4 years ago, they still didn't even have a Republican primary in the North Carolina's first congressional district. So the system... That's where it works. If you look at a state like New York, which has for far too long been controlled by the same group, that's where you're seeing sort of weird economic things going all kinds of haywire. Housing prices are getting outside of the control of the market, where in California to some extent, but that's also
way inflated. Yeah,
I mean it's inflated, but it's also not because that's what the market.
But it's for demand. It's because it's so nice there.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, there's some shitty parts of California too, as far as the weather goes, and there's still a lot of people living in it.
Right. Yeah.
So California does have the benefit. Texas does have the benefit. Yep. North Carolina, the South has the benefit of having the better weather. But if you look at a place like Michigan, I'm as liberal as they come on almost every issue, but I would never want my state to be run the way most of Michigan, and especially Detroit, has been run, which has been one-party control, because it stops being about helping the people and it always becomes about power.
Yeah.
So the people that run Detroit now,
I think most politics is about power anyway.
All politics,
yeah.
But especially when it stops being competitive.
But see, going back to the Denmark thing, if you get that type of benefit from the higher taxes, sure, maybe it makes sense because you can see in those countries, you can see the results of what how the society works together. Like you're actually getting something for your money.
But we can't really have Norway's system completely anyways.
Because we're not Norway.
Well, not just because we're not Norway, because they have a parliamentary system. We don't. We have
I don't want their system, honestly. But I mean, something that works that well.
Right.
That's what I would. We're such a diverse and huge, massive country. It's just a different thing.
I mean, Europe has become very diverse in the last 40 years too. So
that's true.
And honestly, a lot of those things that we've been dealing with here for the last 400 years are actually now you're getting a lot more turn towards nationalism, towards right-wing politics in Europe, because as Europe diversifies, there are a lot of people there that are like, and they're pushing back really hard against that. And that's where you're getting, I mean, that's always been one of the easiest ways to manipulate the American people, is just be like, black men scary. Or and then people go, right, they are. Or to black people, white men scary. And it's always,
race
but it's
is
all power.
Race is always used as a distraction, and especially, I mean, understandly in our society.
We can see it that way as a distraction more, though, because we're white and the benefits from that.
Well, the racial issues that our ancestors created, But at the same time, I think it's a lot of times it's a distraction from the real problems, which is poverty. Because for me, I realize I'm a big science and technology guy, so race just means nothing. It's just it's an arbitrary thing.
It's a social construct.
Well, it's not even that. It's just saying that your ancestors lived in a certain region of the planet for so many years, and they've adapted to that climate.
I totally agree.
But we're the same exact species.
Right.
You know, like we've
totally agree.
Homo sapiens have been here for over 300,000 years.
The problem though is it's so much easier for you and I to be able to have that detached, pulled back version because we don't get punished nearly as often in this system.
Don't get me wrong. I grew up poor and I've seen. Yeah, in the South, I've seen plenty of racism, and
of course,
and I know it's a real thing, and I understand the disadvantages that many minorities face. But I'm saying, as a society, we need to get past the racial issues and focus on fixing poverty, and also working together. And yes, and part of fixing poverty is fixing minority communities that are impoverished.
But absolutely. But also at the same time, when you say or I say, just get past race, to a very large percentage of minority communities in this country, that's a slap in the face because it's really easy for us to say get past race once we're not overwhelmingly benefiting from it, and then the other people who, after 400 years of suffering under our white supremacy control,
basically up until the 50s, or 60s. I mean, even until today. But I mean,
segregated schools in North Carolina.
Sure. Absolutely. But I think we also need to step back and look at all of human history and say all of our ancestors were terrible people. Really. You look at each. So you look at,
and all lives matter too.
You're
using language that's going to automatically anger half the people you're trying to talk to.
No, I'm not because I have there's no ill will in this. It's only,
it doesn't matter.
My desire is to make humanity better, and we have to work together, all of us, no matter what our race is or our background. But we all do need to realize that all of our ancestors were terrible people, all of them, and even when you look at some of the good things that some of our ancestors did, you still have to consider that person's like the culture of that time and where they were, and you say, they did these things that were really good, and they were really good at these things, and these were the bad things they did, and that's with all races, all cultures. Most societies were created by somebody coming in and killing a bunch of people and taking over the society.
But when you make the points that you're making right now, and again, this is a conversation. The only reason I have the understanding of this is because I've had this conversation so many times with so many people of color and made so many of the same mistakes that you're making right now.
I have friends of all races.
Well, of course you do. But I'm saying, but when you come at the conversation about race in the United States with the idea of all our ancestors were bad, then the initial response you're going to get from most minority groups is defensive. They're like, you're still bad. Look at what's still happening. It doesn't matter what happened. Black people in America aren't angry as much about slavery as they are about Jim Crow. They're literally, if you live in this country and you're over the age of 50, you went to segregated schools.
It's crazy.
So it
was illegal to have biracial marriage until 1972.
And so when you make arguments like you were just making, we're all in this and we're all in all societies, but across. I know you don't mean it that way.
But I'm not saying that racism is not real either.
Right, I know that. But when you come with the structural argument that you just made, you are putting a lot of people immediately on the defensive, and you're ending the opportunity for real dialogue.
I guess if it's misunderstood.
I agree with you, and I would say that you should reverse that, and when people of color make the same statement, like Black Lives Matter, you immediately start a conversation that puts everybody else against them, and it starts the conversation from an equal but opposite point of view.
I mean, but again, you're talking about the group that has structural power and the group that is gaining their own power for the first time. And so
I'm not talking about that. I'm just saying that in the very same argument that you're making, which I agree with, starts it off where by making that argument, anybody of color automatically takes in a defensive way and say you're still a bad person. Right. You also have now a massively growing group that says by this other side making these types of statements, they take it defensively. And so you're having the exact same but opposite effect.
Of course,
and on the other side.
There is, the dumbest thing that has happened to the political left in the last 20 years is that some idiot decided to make the phrase defund the police.
Right.
What a dumb marketing play. That's the biggest problem the left has now is they're so bad at marketing.
Should be reform the police.
Martin Luther King, part of the genius of Martin Luther King was not only that he recognized the problem, he also recognized how to translate the problem to people it wasn't affecting.
Right.
He was able to make people in New York or people in the Midwest or California who weren't experiencing the hardcore segregation, they made them see it and made them. And the way he did that was because he understood how to market. He chose to go to a place where the sheriff's name was Bull Connor because he knew Bull Connor was going to make good press. Because one, he knew who Bull Connor was. He knew but he studied everywhere throughout the South, and he went to the places where he had marketable names, where he had an argument that he could make, and he knew Bull Connor was going to get the dogs out. Like one of the most famous images from the Civil Rights Movement is the image of a police dog jumping up like it's going to bite a black teenage boy as he's walking by. The reality of that photograph is that black boy wasn't at the protest. He was walking by. And if you see that, like most of the depictions of that image now, they're color corrected and they're made so you can't see the expressions as well. And when it was printed in the newspaper, especially with just straight black and white print, it was harder to recognize the expression. But if you actually see the detailed photo, the boy wasn't even all that afraid of the dog. He just backed up, and the dog wasn't lashing out like he was barking. He just jumped up. But that picture was captured, and that picture was spread around. And at that level of marketing, you can call it marketing, you can call it propaganda, you can call it whatever you want.
Propaganda.
But it was that. I mean, all marketing is propaganda, and all propaganda is marketing.
Right. Yeah.
But it was by being able to translate those messages, it made people open their eyes.
Right.
And I love my mom to death. Like I do. I love her to death. She grew up and went to a segregated high school. It was her senior year when her high school was desegregated. That was in Richmond. And to this day, she's still constantly trying to make the argument, well, I mean, it's not like it. I mean, come on, we don't do that anymore. But the system, a lot of those systems still exist.
Sure, yeah, I agree with you, but
no, your point is absolutely right. But also, I feel like we, as the group that has for the full extent of this country's history, my ancestors got here in Jamestown, so I got 400 years of benefiting from this system.
Yeah, my family's been here for over 250 years since before it was a nation.
So because we've benefited for so much, the system was so much more designed for us. That is why when someone says Black Lives Matter, I am not put on a defensive.
That's where I disagree with you to an extent, because I don't disagree with you. I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that. But my problem is that you're saying there's a difference between you and another black man or a black man that's the same.
But there is.
But there's biologically no difference.
No, of course there's no difference.
We're the same thing. We're exactly the same thing.
But when you spend 400 years beating somebody and then all of a sudden you drop your whip and go, no one should hit anybody, he's still got the scars. And so to not acknowledge those scars is truly, truly insulting.
Yeah, but I mean, you also have...
You can't just suddenly go,
if you
no blamesies. Like that's...
but how long do you carry it forward?
Right, the society has to change. And
my family had a 300-year battle, a 300-year... Look up the Story family, right? We don't talk about it. We were oppressed and we were ran from our country. It's not...
In the U.S., we have...
Kids are still getting shot by cops now.
That's white kids too.
White kids too, but
that's
again,
my point. Is
the militarization of the police has...
That's a big
I don't
problem.
think I don't think children... I don't think anybody should be getting shot by anybody, but unfortunately, and not all cases are justified, and unfortunately it happens. Yeah. I do think there should be a whole lot more non-lethal options.
And they're working on that.
But again, this is a part we always have to remember how power works.
I agree.
Power works through billionaires who own media companies now,
or people like me that want to be billionaires,
right? But a billionaire who owns, whether it's NBC or whether it's Fox News, they have the money and the power to influence the narrative. And as long as they are always for profit and for power, are always going to run the story about the black kid that got shot because it gets ratings.
Yeah.
And our system...
Well, so does division.
No, and I just want to say this too.
Yeah.
This is important.
But we can't
If I see a black
that.
kid or a white kid about to get shot, I'm probably going to stand in front of him regardless of color. Like,
of course, dude.
Like, I think a lot of people would. I think for me what gets really... Like, I see so much where it says both sides, right? Like, I don't think... I can't look at Republicans, especially the extreme ones, or Democrats the same, and feel good about it because they're so fucking extreme. When I feel like we're a lot closer.
Yeah, most people.
You and I disagree about some things, but actually now talking to you, we agree about a lot.
But
of
again,
stuff too.
like the far reach, the story is always the narrative that's always going to be pushed is the polls.
I agree.
That's always going to be because again, it's our news, our media is a for-profit system.
Yeah, it's a problem.
And it's a problem, but it's also, otherwise it's state-controlled, and then it's all just one side's propaganda.
Right.
And so you can't do it that way either.
Well, the good thing is we have the internet, so we have, there's a
Right.
lot more diversity in media.
Right.
But,
But from that you also get QAnon, so it's...
Well, and what's getting ready to happen, I think,
and that's
you're going
fine,
to have party-controlled social media soon.
But do you see what
want.
happens?
Yeah.
But do you, like, if you really look, though, if you see what happens when, like, media is the best example. When you go full deregulation, and again, I'm not for too much regulation, but I'm also not for zero regulation. The reason I'm not a libertarian or a socialist is because too much is bad and none is bad.
Right.
Because when you have too much, you have what we had in the 1960s where you turned on the news and it was basically the same narrative and there was the fairness doctrine and like you had to give both sides equal time even when both sides weren't telling the truth.
Right, yeah.
And it made for an inaccurate, dishonest system.
Yeah.
Well, now, because we have the internet, which there's fucking no regulations other than like kiddie porn, basically.
Which is fine because it's all of our minds linked together.
Right.
So,
But from that, you get fucking QAnon, you get January 6th. Like, Donald Trump is an asshole. But without the internet, Donald Trump's still just an asshole. He's not an asshole that became president. Only the internet allows, and we benefited from it with, like, we got our first, whether you liked Obama or not, the historic accomplishment of America electing a black president was only possible because of the internet.
Sure.
But also, because of the internet, you can elect fucking crazy banana pants Donald Trump. And you can get, people storming the Capitol building, whether it's in Michigan or in D.C.
Yeah.
So you can get, and you also get people who are overselling the narrative of certain groups being targeted that aren't being targeted as much as the media might want to sell it to you.
Well, that goes back to adjusting to the information.
Right.
But
our kids are better at it than we are.
They are.
But they're also quick to cancel.
But still, back to the racial stuff, the solution to the racial problems is fixing poverty. That's bottom line. That's solving poverty because if you create a system where everybody has equal opportunities.
You still need truth and reconciliation. Like you can eliminate all the poverty you want in America until America has an honest, real discussion about the history of systemic racism in this country. It's not going away.
We do have the discussion every day.
We don't have a national. Look at what South Africa did.
You still have to solve the problems in these communities that are impoverished.
Of course, but there's still poverty in South Africa too. But that's
a totally different government, and
of course it's a completely different government. But again, part of what has fixed what were issues that ran even longer than ours, where there's more balance in South Africa now than what you're seeing here, is because they had a genuine look at Nazi Germany. Like after the collapse, the way that Germany became a strong economic power again was one they had all been used to working in factories, and so they all just rebuilt the factories and went back. Same thing with Japan. But part of what that was they had an honest, open discussion where they could not deny the horrors that they committed. You cannot graduate high school in Germany without acknowledging the heritage of what the Nazis did.
Well,
you cannot deny. You won't graduate high school in Germany if you deny that 6 million Jews were killed. You can't.
Right.
Where in the United States, though, There is no truth and reconciliation about what we did to Native Americans. That we can, you and I, like all of us, we're smart enough that we know the history. We've read up on it. We understand it. But this was more what we educated ourselves on. Yeah. So we recognize that there was a genocide on this continent.
Absolutely.
There was, North and South America. Even worse in South America and in Mexico. Oh, my God. I mean, but until you truly acknowledge.
But that's not directly related to us. That's how all humans were back then. Even Native Americans would they would conquer each other's tribes and stuff.
Again, you're
people
having that argument again that you got to get past those arguments.
Humans are savages. They were, and they're getting better.
Of course they are.
That's
so
the
what
argument.
you're saying though is you want people to apologize for winning the fight, the war, the conquering.
No, it's not about apologizing.
Just acknowledging it.
It's not. It's about acknowledging the reality of what happened.
I think that what we have to do is we do acknowledge those things. We study those things and learn from those mistakes of our ancestors, and make
as a society and as a culture, we don't.
But no, that's what we have to do.
We're intelligent people who are well-read.
Just like the wars in the Middle East, we're in these. Those wars have no purpose other than making trillions of dollars for the industrial war complex.
I mean, unless you're the lady that was getting raped in one of Saddam's pleasure palaces, then it made a big difference. So it's
sure, maybe a few people benefited, but what about all the families that lost their lives?
Of course,
because
and again, that was more devil's advocate than real. But when we oversimplify anything,
it's like we'll keep bombing them until they love us,
right? Which is completely stupid. But also at the same time, you have to recognize that there is political power in Iraq right now.
Yeah, there's oil there too.
Come from people who were liberated from that. Okay. And so we can't have a conversation about the Middle East without having a conversation about the fact that some of the people right now who do control power in those countries benefited from our intervention.
Sure.
But that was part of why people didn't understand what Saddam was in power, in part because we put him there. And then as the years went by, most of what was going on, I mean, Iran was really the only country that we did topple it, but then they took it back independently without us. That was one of the few countries. And that was a country that was the most liberal country in the Middle East until the Shah took over and everything.
Right.
But it's not about, because I don't owe anybody an apology. I didn't own anybody.
Right.
I didn't segregate anybody. Until the last 5 years, I never had really an ounce of power.
That's why we need to just focus on the problems of today. And today our problems are we do have racial problems, and a lot of our racial problems stem from poverty.
Right, of course.
Generations of poverty.
But until you're willing to acknowledge the history that got us to where we are today, and some of that history,
I acknowledge
you can make the argument, and this is true. White people were the ones that ended slavery because we went to war and fought a war. Like, you can talk about that, but you also have to acknowledge that white people were the ones that chattel slavery mastered it in a way that had never been done.
Well, honestly,
in
a lot of today's community problems are caused from the wars, like from World War II, when they brought in, manufacturing companies in these cities. Right. They brought in huge numbers of black people to live in these industrialized areas in this
cheap labor.
Cheap labor. That's what it was.
And then when it stopped being cheap labor, they moved into Mexico for more cheap labor.
And they didn't let people leave those areas. Those communities stayed in those same locations. That's why you have South Chicago.
Of course.
Yeah.
But the reality is we can all acknowledge the economic history that's happened. We can all acknowledge where we are today. We can talk about where we are today. But as a country, there has to be a certain level of healing, because you are
hard-pressed
to find a black person in this country that doesn't have PTSD.
But what do you think the solution is?
The solution is exactly that. The solution is a national narrative, a national conversation that goes beyond for-profit media, but still includes for-profit media, that basically it's not going to be fixed for us because we're too old. But so that we're making sure every kid in America that goes to at minimum a public school cannot sit through a history class that only talks about Columbus as a hero.
Yeah, he was a terrible person. Yeah.
You cannot sit through a history class that a teacher cannot teach that. Because I heard this in school. Well, the Civil War wasn't about slavery. Read the read what South Carolina wrote about why they were leaving the Union. It was about, it wasn't only, of course, there were economic reasons. There were a lot of reasons involved. But the largest and most important reason was they knew slavery was going to go away, so they wanted to keep it.
They're going to lose their
free
labor.
Until you have that conversation where we don't still have, and there are a lot of them, history teachers in elementary schools who are trying to defend the actions of their ancestors more than telling the truth about what happened. Yeah. My ancestors fought for the Confederacy too. They did.
Sure. Yeah.
My great-great-great-grandfather has a Confederate flag on his headstone.
Well, fortunately, most of mine were pacifists. They didn't.
Well, mine weren't. But until we have a true national, honest conversation about that, and most of that comes from us not talking, but listening, and making sure the people who have suffered through, whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's gay people, it doesn't, like, until they can truly feel heard and included, this stuff's not going to start to get truly better.
Sure. Yeah.
And so much of us, we get defensive. I do too, man. We all get defensive when it comes to conversations. Like if somebody says Black Lives Matter, the first time I heard Black Lives Matter, my first response was, well, all lives. But then as soon as somebody was like, dude, when somebody has breast cancer, do you, if somebody has a breast cancer awareness t-shirt, do you run up to them and get in their face and be like, all cancer matters, motherfucker?
No, I understand it. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
No, mine would be more like what I would, a better response might be another person with a different type of cancer comes up in a sympathetic way and says, hey, I feel your pain. I also have cancer.
Right.
You know, where do you get treatment at? Or what are you doing? You got any positive tips to get through this, right? So two different types of cancer can coexist. So a Black Lives Matter person and a person that believes all lives matter be like, man, hey, I really respect you. I think your life does matter.
But again,
delivery is off.
A person with cancer, even if it's a different type of cancer, coming up to another person with cancer is a different conversation.
There's a lot of white people that feel like that there's racist against them, that feel like black people are racist towards white people.
Yeah, and they have every right to be.
Yeah.
Well, no, they
have no. After 400 years, and again,
400 years,
you don't have a right to be racist towards anybody.
No, you have a right to be racist against. You can be as racist as you want to be.
You can be
whoever you want to be.
I don't think anybody should be racist.
I don't think they should be either. Yeah. But you have the right to be.
Well, sure, and the
difference is
that's something
racist,
I was going to bring up too.
Behind it. You're a landlord.
That's something I was going to bring up too. Is I understand Black Lives Matter, the statement itself. I support that, but also. People taking a knee at football games. I think that's actually a good way to protest. It's a very peaceful, respectful way to protest. I appreciate that, honestly. But beyond all that,
I think for-profit media that's never going to let that be
right, because they just stir up nonsense.
Right.
But
I agree.
But when I look at these things, also the number one thing I see is freedom of speech and the importance of our freedom of speech, the First Amendment. Both of those things, no one should have a problem with either one of those because it's freedom of speech, and that's the most important thing we have in our Constitution.
There is freedom of speech, which I'm no one's a bigger advocate of free speech than me, but there is also 2 + 2 does equal 4. And you can freely, and no one's ever going to arrest you for it, and no one's ever going to put you in a cell for it. You can stand on the side of the road and yell, 2 + 2 = 5, all you want, and that's fine.
Right, yeah,
but the second that you have power and influence, and you start using that to convince people that 2 + 2 = 5, I, with my free speech, can call you a liar and a piece of shit.
And hopefully society will correct that.
And say that your ability to use that for profit and for damage and for your own power is wrong.
Well, that's why these give us all power. This gives power to everybody.
And none.
Well, information is the most powerful
Enough
thing we
information
have.
Means there's no information.
Yeah. So, and one of the things you said earlier too, because you had
this
said
is such a funny conversation about comedy, by the way.
I know. Yeah. I'm enjoying it either way.
I am too.
I'm starting to wake up, a little bit. It's coming. The caffeine's finally hitting me. But because you said after 400 years of racism, they deserve to be racist. And you didn't say that exactly, but
I said they have the right.
They have the right to be.
See,
right?
that's how these conversations go off.
Yeah, apologies.
But honestly,
I said something close to that.
Yeah, but that's
they have the right to be. Yeah. Right. So from that premise, and I'm just playing devil's advocate as well, because I'm listening, I'm learning, I'm thinking, I'm taking it in. Yeah. So I'm receptive to it, even things that I may not fully agree with. I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. There's just small little points where I differ.
Right.
Right. And I think
I would hope so.
Yeah. There's little things though, like, so if that, let's take some other things in. So take people that weren't slave owners, take people that weren't in this country for 400 years, take people that had no part in it, but they just happen to be white that come from another country and they're here. Right.
I still benefit from my whiteness today.
Yes. Well, do you?
Absolutely.
We
talked about it earlier about the cops. I
There's no incentives for them. You have more white people on food stamps.
That's because there's more white people.
Yeah, but there's no incentives for them. What incentives do you have to be white in America? Are you getting specialized loans? You getting colleges? You're getting.
Yeah.
You're not.
Absolutely.
Where?
Absolutely. Because I grew up in a system that.
Some of these people may not have grown up in the system. They simply moved here. So they move here, and then they've got to acknowledge something that they weren't a part of.
Absolutely.
And then they experience racism.
Because the system's still happening.
Yeah, but they're experiencing racism for what?
But the idea of making it exclusively historical is part of the problem. Because the idea that someone white in America isn't still
all this
currently benefiting.
It just creates another oppressed class. So we're going to fast forward 100 years of this happening, reverse racism.
Doesn't matter.
And then we're going to have the same thing happen, but it's going to be white people that are looking for these apologies.
My solution is sort of like yours, that it's more of a futuristic one.
Right.
But the beauty of all this is in like 300 years,
it ain't matter.
There's not going to be any more white people.
I think it's going to be less time.
There's not going to be any more black people.
Yeah.
It's just everybody's going to look Mexican and everybody's going to party and it's going to be fine. But they'll find new reasons to be mad.
In 300 years, I don't think we'll be human. But
I mean, that matter too. I mean, it's going to be designer babies.
I think these problems.
Every kid's going to be born with a 9-inch dick because
we probably won't have dicks by then.
I would.
Oh yeah, we will. Humans, power. Understand how power works. Dicks never go away.
Yeah, I want a bigger one.
You really need to read the future is closer than you think, because it's an amazing, profound book.
Have you read Howard Zinn's People's History?
I haven't read it.
All right, you should read it. It's People's History of the United States. It is.
You send it to me too when you get it?
Yeah,
I'll check it out.
And again, this is it's this thick, by the way. So it's
gonna be a read.
Yeah, it's a read, but it's literally every ounce of American history written not through the eyes of the colonizer, but through the eyes of the colonized.
Gotcha. Howard Zinn is called what?
The People's History of the United States.
And by the way, there's a lot of things that you're saying. Like, so let's say that we as a nation, we're going to go conquer another nation, right? And that was the goal. It would have been supported and applauded, and it would have been what your country and your citizens and your family wanted you to do, and you'd come back and be a hero. But you would go out and literally kill, rape, murder, pillage, and that's history.
But the United States figured out an amazing system, and it's the same system that we figured out with slavery, and part of why it honestly, and it wasn't just because of the wars, because a lot of people realized it. Why own it and deal with the back end liability when you can just rent it, and then when you're done with it, throw it away?
Right.
Well,
and that was as our economic system realized, because slave owners did still have to feed and give living. There were terrible living conditions, but there were still living, survivable, strong enough to still work conditions for slaves.
Yeah.
Where once we got into a full factory system, it was more profitable to not give them. And then in our system now, people go out and work a full-time job and don't earn a livable wage.
Well, you look at the prison
it's
system.
cheaper,
like
and then you don't have to take care of them when they're old either.
I agree with
old
that.
slaves still got to go see the doctor. Where our current system, and the same thing with colonialism, and there's no reason for us to take over Iraq and own it, because then we have to fix the problem. But what we can do is go over there and topple their government, put one in place that does what we want them to do,
resources.
And then we still control the resources,
Yeah.
but we don't have to pay for the back end.
Yes.
And it's all just more efficient capitalism. It's a more, and there's the horrors of it and the benefits of it.
That's what the trade agreements were in the 90s.
Yeah.
We still own the manufacturing companies that produce most of the stuff in the world, but they're all in other countries, mostly in China, and it's just for cheap labor.
There's no logical reason, because free trade is amazing.
Fair trade would be amazing.
But yeah, fair trade is what you actually want. Where there's no tariff if you build it in Mexico, as long as everyone working in that factory is making an equitable livable wage.
Yeah.
See, that's the way trade agreements should work.
No,
where
absolutely.
we have unlimited trade with anyone that's willing,
but it's the same across the
uplift
board.
their society. But we can't do that because we don't even do that for our own people.
Right.
So how the fuck are we going to tell somebody else they got to do it?
Yeah,
I agree with that.
It's important to have manufacturing and businesses across the globe because you lift people out of poverty.
Yeah.
But you have to keep a standard, and it should be the same across the board. And that,
of course,
because otherwise it just takes from one place and puts it somewhere else. And it's just companies monopolizing on cheap labor.
You know what? But we also can't deny that there have been some real benefits to all the outsourcing that we did. The job loss sucked, but go to New York and look at the Hudson River. Go to Cleveland and go to Boston. You can swim in the river there now. Well, because the manufacturing, the plant that's up the river isn't dumping chemicals and poison.
That's
so we've actually, there are, and again, we don't acknowledge those benefits.
That's
and when
true.
we only talk about the horrors of it and we don't acknowledge the benefits, then that's how people end up feeling unheard.
But the true solution to those things would be cleaner manufacturing. Because on a global scale, we still live on the same planet.
You still got to blow the top of a mountain off to get the.
We have to take care of the planet, and so we just move the grunge somewhere else.
So China accounts
move
for
the smog to another place.
Well, China accounts for more of the world pollution than every other nation combined.
Yeah.
So really, all we did was we just took it out of our backyard, which is kind of circles back to that argument that you said earlier, which was it's easier to not care about something. You were talking about your friends that are one's Muslim, one's Jewish, I think, and you were talking about how all you can say is because it doesn't affect you, right? So now it doesn't affect us because it's in China,
right?
But also China is,
even though it still does,
it does.
We have a unified world climate. So.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. The Sahara Desert helps to fertilize.
I like these types of
Amazon.
Conversations. I just want to say
South
that.
America.
By the way.
Me too.
Yeah.
So the whole globe, the whole world works together. The whole planet is.
In theory, we should.
All life on the planet is connected. So it's all.
It's connected. That doesn't necessarily mean it works together by choice. At least sometimes it all works together, but it's not always. By choice.
All affects it. So it all. Everything.
It all influences
it. Itself. But
so we've talked about a ton of things. But I just want to circle back because I don't know if I actually asked you. Do you have something in mind that you think, not a solution, maybe you say that's difficult, but do you have steps in the right direction as far as for poverty or like a minimum wage? Because he was talking about if you brought it to $30 or $40, but I mean, do you have something in mind that you think is good?
Fundamentally, my argument, the correction for the minimum wage is one, we need a baseline that is a living wage for what the value of the dollar is today.
And should that be the same in every country, in every state, in every county, in every area in the United States, or should it be different depending on where you're at?
That is, again, the base minimum wage should be, even in West Virginia, which is as poor as it gets, for a family of four to survive, you still need at minimum $15 an hour.
Gotcha.
So the base, of course, of 15, and then in each state, like California probably actually needs to go to more like 27 if you look at where they are. New York needs to be in the 20s.
So I like this already because you acknowledge that it can't be the same everywhere because cost of living.
But the cost of living is different.
Yeah.
But also there still has to be a base.
I agree with
that
the base.
Anywhere is a living wage, which is right now it's actually more like 17, but when we started this argument 8 years ago, it was 15, so we still say 15.
Yeah.
But really where it should be is about 17. But then once you lock that in, you do with the minimum wage the same thing that we do with Social Security, where every year your Social Security goes up based on cost of living increases. It's not a set amount. There's not a minimum Social Security. There's the base that goes up each year.
It's a COLA allowance.
Yeah. So then once we establish a baseline minimum wage, instead of having but it's such a good political argument, they won't do it because it's so fun you can win an argument by saying the minimum wage is too high, or you can win an argument by saying the minimum wage is too low. So they won't fix the problem, and that's one of the problems with our system. Yeah. But it's the minimum wage should just literally be based on projections of cost of living, and then that way every company can calculate it in, and everybody's got their actuaries that run those numbers anyways. So if you run a business here, and as cost of living goes up here, if you're 17 today, next year though cost of living is going up because inflation's doing this. So next year it's going to be 1736, and then it's going to be in the year after that.
I'm going to adjust my pricing and move forward.
Of course.
It's not.
I actually don't care what you put minimum wage to personally for me, because I'm just going to adjust my price and pass it to my client.
That's the problem with doing the minimum.
So is every other business.
Yeah.
But here's where
And I don't pay my people. We don't have anybody close to minimum wage. I don't pay my 10-year-old minimum wage. Just to be clear.
But do you file an individual or as a business?
Well, mine's complex.
Well, mine too.
Yeah. We've got.
You got to do both. I mean,
yeah,
if you have companies, you have to.
Yeah, I've got companies in multiple other states and we have 1,100
Right.
And we have I need to get into Canada to tell you.
Yeah,
they're still working on.
Before you get off that though, the minimum wage thing is a big topic for me because the way you're describing it can't work based on the current system we have. It's not possible. And
it works with Social Security.
It doesn't. Well, sort of, but it doesn't solve the problem either, because what happens is if you increase the minimum wage, and this doesn't affect huge corporations as much, but most of your businesses are smaller businesses. They're considered small businesses.
By the way, just the right answer is those businesses should fail.
No, they shouldn't.
Absolutely.
Because
it's called capitalism, dude.
No,
the system
it's not.
Works both ways.
It's not capitalism.
There are winners and there are losers.
Listen to me. If you're setting the wage, you can't say they should fail because you're changing. You're adding an obstacle for these businesses. No, wait. Let me.
Cannot operate at a profit and pay a living wage. Your business should fail.
No, listen. If you're setting a high minimum wage, then all companies are going to have to raise their prices on their products. Yeah. To pass that on to the consumers.
Yeah, and then cost of living increases, raises the minimum wage.
It never catches. It's chasing its tail.
Of course it is. Of course it's always chasing its tail.
That's why. No, it has to be done from a societal standpoint to spread it out through the society evenly. That way, the larger corporations can carry more of the burden.
Make it pass. First off, the small businesses.
But listen, here's what's going to happen: is you're going to put all your small business. Most of your small businesses are going to go out of business because they can't handle the burden.
Yeah,
and those businesses will be taken over by large corporations. Yep. Then all you'll have is large corporations. That's not what we want.
That's called late-stage capitalism. Unless you want to get rid of capitalism, you have to recognize that innovation...
You don't have to do it that way. You just change the value of the currency, and also you change the society. It's just like we talked about earlier, paying more taxes to get something, to see what you're, to actually see what you're getting out of it is what you want.
You can't artificially change the value of currency.
It is artificial. It's already artificial. It's not artificially changing.
Everything is artificial.
The construct.
But there is a fundamental difference between influence and true art. You cannot add in. There are certain things that we all, as a company,
all the
as
rules
a nation,
can be changed.
Of course, they can be changed, but they cannot be changed to that drastic of a level if you have it passed.
But what you can't change is if you have a certain amount of resources and then you cut in and you're trying to divide something that can't be divided that much.
Right, but again, back to what I was talking about earlier. The reason I even brought up the housing thing. The reason the solution was private ownership and both political sides didn't like it. The system that you're talking about, what can actually happen in America politically is that we can get the minimum wage to probably 14.
It doesn't fix the problem.
But again,
the cost of living just goes up and they're in the same place.
Of course it does.
They still can't pay their bills.
That is why, and then you pass the housing reform thing like they did with HUD that nobody talked about at the time. Nobody gave a shit about it at the time. You just slide in and then it goes up based on poverty and based on cost of living.
We're still making a broken system. We're trying to make a broken system
work. It's not broken.
It is.
He owns homes.
How
many employees do you have?
What's our deficit right now?
Oh, I'd have to look.
Compared to
$20 trillion?
Based off to GDP, it's not high.
It's like $20 trillion.
Which is not high based off GDP.
We'll never pay it off.
Of course we will. It's called inflation. We were never going to pay off World War II either until we paid it off because of inflation. You're arguing for an economic system that one has no political reality in actually coming into effect.
That's not true.
Once it does come into effect, which eventually, I agree with what you're saying. In 100 years,
your time scale is way off though, based on technology. You're not accounting for the changes we're going to experience over the next 2 decades. When I say 200 years of advancement in the next 10 years, it's very possible.
Marx made that argument in 1900.
This is not 1908. This is not.
I understand that, but the idea that eventually technology is going to replace the need for a workforce is a misnomer that has existed since the first person.
But it's never been on this scale, man. You're looking at the past. The future is not like the past.
But you cannot. But the argument that you're making, economists, like a certain group of economists were making this argument that you're making in 1930.
But this is not 1930.
I understand that, but the argument that you're making, they were saying exactly what you're saying.
But it's
saying
not
we should
on
do
this
exactly
level.
with currency what you're saying we should do. But there was never a realistic political means, and there was never a actual large enough group of unemployed people. When we hit,
it's coming.
When we hit 30% unemployment in this country and there's actual revolution in the street, when that happens, that's when your system is going to come, and it will.
Well, look at guys like Andrew Yang who see it coming. I don't agree with the way he wants to fix it, but I do understand that what's coming. And if you need to read that book I'm telling you about.
It is not, that transition is not going to be a painless constitutional political.
But we need to plan for it because it's
adjustment.
coming. And it's coming fast.
We are. That's why we have savings accounts, and that's why all our money's not wrapped up in. It's like we are, and that's why a lot of people are moving into walled communities, and that's why I'm glad the Second Amendment's still around. Because while I don't want a person with a mental disorder to have a gun, I'm glad I have mine.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's
Absolutely.
and again the reality is a fundamental change as large as the one that you want to make does not happen solely through the structure of our political system. There will be what happened on January 6th is going to look like somebody pissing in a bucket versus what's going to happen in this country in 30 years, 40. I'm guessing more like
not that far, man. I'm telling you, it's coming quick.
This
exponential, man. It's not. You're thinking linearly.
This is not only a means of revolution; it's also a means of putting you to sleep. Very few people.
Technology is what we do, and it's probably what we're becoming.
As long as people can get by enough, and this is what we've learned from the Walmart system. As long as people can get by with a place to live, enough to eat, and then a paycheck where they get to make a few false choices between Nikes and Adidas, they stay asleep. They do. We've proven that in this country.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And again, with more information,
teach people to be consumers.
With more information, we are getting more revolutionary mindsets. We are. Yeah. We are getting angry people, and that's why we're seeing stuff like whether it was the Black Lives Matter protests or January 6th. You are seeing the early stages of that.
But this conversation, 10 years ago, nobody would hear this conversation.
I was having this conversation 20 years ago, but okay.
But I'm just saying. I'm saying as recent as
doing this a while.
I'm saying as recently as 10 years ago, no one would hear this conversation. Now thousands of people will hear this conversation.
Yeah, at least a few dozen.
And millions of people are having this conversation, and that's why these things are changing.
I know, but the fact that we are having this conversation, we will influence a couple of minds. A few people will hear this and agree with you, agree with me. Yeah. But there are so many conversations happening right now.
I think we're all
the
going.
Idea of a unified narrative is going to be so much harder. It's so. Do you know how addictive Netflix is?
Oh yeah.
Netflix is better for controlling a population than literally every propagandist that the Nazis ever had.
It's a type of sedation.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's whether it's Candy Crush or whether it's QAnon, and you believing a crazy conspiracy theory.
And we need those things.
Right.
Honestly, that's why we have sports. Sports prevents war.
Sports does prevent war, but it's all three-card Monte, and there's really never a winner. But you still think you can win.
But eventually
You're
there will
watching
be.
The cards
because society is progressively getting better. You should read.
Of course.
You should read Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. That's a really good book that shows how society gets better.
And you can read Lucifer Principle by Howard Bloom too. I get it. I've read it.
What concerns me, but also gives me hope and optimism, is that a lot of the people that are leading these technological changes really care about humanity. They do. No, I'm serious. They
all have autism, bro. What are you talking about? Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, has Asperger's.
I'm on the spectrum, man.
I mean, so am I. But these guys don't.
But these people do care about humanity, and actually a lot of people on the spectrum actually are more empathetic than people that aren't.
The reality is that most Facebook has Mark Zuckerberg as its head because it was founded.
Well, I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg, but I do trust people like Elon Musk, or people like Peter Diamandis, or people like Ray Kurzweil.
Control it.
Or like
you're fundamentally confusing how money works.
But it's not about money for these people. It's about
For some people.
But they're
Technological
controlled by their
advancement.
shareholders, which are hedge fund managers and people that run large-scale...
they're not.
Yes, they are.
These guys aren't. No.
Literally, Zuckerberg, tomorrow, if 3 hedge fund managers in America, 3, it's only 3.
I don't care about
all
Zuckerberg. I don't trust him.
But it doesn't matter whether it's Zuckerberg. It doesn't matter whether it's Musk. It doesn't matter which company it is. Even Warren Buffett acknowledges this, and Warren Buffett is more involved in this than almost anyone. The second there any major corporation in this country that has more than $1 billion in revenue and is publicly traded, they can all be shut down, reformatted, rebuilt. If any 3 of the big 20 hedge fund managers in this country make the choice to restructure that company, it's restructured. And it's literally, they can make that choice over a bottle of whiskey, and they can be having drinks, and they can go, that guy's a dick, and completely restructure the company. Or they can go, he's pushing for an economic restructuring that I don't agree with,
Well,
and his algorithm
these technologies
is pushing it.
will
I'm
make,
taking it over.
But these technologies will make them more money. That's not the problem.
It's not about money. It's about power, dude.
It's not even about power. It's about creating stuff. That's what people do. These guys that are in these fields, that are the leaders of these fields, they create things and they enjoy it.
By the illusion of
and
choice,
they want to
man.
fundamentally change the structure of society.
But the second they try to
listen,
change too
it's
much, they lose their power.
But they'll make the people that support them unlimited amounts of money. That's not the problem. That's why those people support them, because they're still going to make that money.
No
but
one
also,
with $80 billion
they can make
gives a fuck
society
about
better.
money. They give a fuck about power, control, and influence.
But
and the money
it's
is
about,
an enabler
It's
for
about
that.
doing what they do to us. It's about making things work better. It's about changing things. It's about creating technology that betters humanity, that betters society. It's about all those things. For a lot of these people, not all of them, but a lot of them.
The second.
Like if you look at guys like Dr. George Church at Harvard, who's one of the leading geneticists on the planet, he cares about people. And
Of course he does.
He'll even talk about corporations in his speeches. The pharmaceutical companies hate him.
Right. And the reality is, the reason that someone as smart as him, as competent as him, isn't a household name is because the guys that truly control this country just shut him up.
Well, most people don't understand what he's doing either.
But the reason they don't understand is because they're not being informed.
But he's one of the...
Because he's being silenced by people that control the system.
But he's not being silenced. He's doing it.
Absolutely is.
He's doing it. These guys are going to have technology by 2030 that will stop your aging.
You know why you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is?
Yeah, because he's a very outgoing, big personality.
Because he is a articulate, talkative person who fits a mold that
but he's
never says
charismatic.
anything that's... Well, of course he's charismatic.
Yeah.
Everybody that gets on TV is charismatic.
He's a TV personality, yeah.
Of course he's a TV personality. But the reason he has been elevated into the position of public awareness that he has been in is because he doesn't go too far on anything.
Yeah, but he's not really fundamentally changing anything either. He's an
Of course he's
information
not.
guy.
Of course he's not.
But
That's
people
why
like
he's
George Church,
elevated.
people like George Church are fundamentally changing things.
Right, but there's no
But
understanding of that.
he's also kind of boring to watch. He's not an exciting person. So and nobody knows they don't understand him. Like he's doing his work and he's not spending a lot of time talking about it, and he's not charismatic. So he's not exciting.
He's not pursuing power. He's pursuing innovation.
Yeah,
but the people who
he does very well though. He owns some big companies.
I understand that, but the people whose true pursuit, whose true goal is power, which are the hedge fund guys, which are the
hedge fund guys. Sure, Elon Musk is not pursuing power. He's pursuing change.
Oh, good God!
He's an inventor, man. He's a creator. That's what he does. His thing is creating things that change the structure of society.
You don't do what Elon Musk did today with Bitcoin if you're not interested in power. You don't.
Actually, what he's doing with Bitcoin is what I'm saying about changing the construct of the currency. You could actually
smart to believe that.
You could actually no. It's what I've been talking. It's not what I've been talking about.
I'm assuming what you're talking about is not accepting Bitcoin because of the Chinese pollution and the whole statement he made and all that. Is that what you're talking about?
Right, but that was.
I'm talking about the Dogecoin thing.
The same energy, though, that is produced to create his cars is the same energy. The same energy that runs his cars is the same one that.
I thought the statement was kind of bullshit too. But
no, it was.
Well, I'm not talking about that though.
I didn't know if you knew the statement.
I don't hate Elon Musk. I'm just saying.
I was saying it for Neil's benefit. I didn't know if you knew the statement.
But if Elon Musk ever truly became a revolutionary in terms of changing the system as much as you're suggesting,
he is.
He's gone.
But listen, what he's doing with Dogecoin is exactly what I'm talking about with currency. He's taking this worthless thing, this worthless blockchain technology, That one was a joke, and he's making it something valuable, and he's saying that we can do that with other things, like with reevaluating the currency. We could use blockchain technology, and people like Ben Goertzel, who's a brilliant AI scientist and entrepreneur, believes this too. Is we could take blockchain type technologies that are decentralized, and we could have certain blockchains. Or cryptocurrencies for different things. Like you could have a medical cryptocurrency, or you could have an educational cryptocurrency. You could have different ones. So when you subsidize the entry level people in society to raise the floor, you can use all these different things to do that.
Of course, everything you're saying is true, but you're still ignoring the fact that the largest shareholders in this country decide. Whether it's on a whim, whether it's based on actual information, whether it's based on they just don't like that it's unstable at times. The second they decide Bitcoin and Dogecoin and all those are gone, they're gone.
Yeah, but what happens if...
Because they'll buy Congress, and Congress will just ban it.
But the only reason they'll do that is that they're losing money. They're not going to lose money with these guys.
It's not about money for those guys. It's about power, man.
Well, that is power. It's still power.
But the second it threatens them, it's
not
gone.
going to threaten them. It's not going to threaten them, though.
Unless you don't know they're not going to decide that.
Because they'll do better.
But you don't. One, you can't prove that. That's all supposition. You don't know. You can't prove it, and it doesn't matter even if it will, because if they decide it won't, it's done. Because it takes the Koch brothers tomorrow. If they could end cryptocurrency like that, because all they've got to do is call. They own enough of them, the members of Congress and the members of the Senate, and go, "Hey, this Bitcoin thing is getting weird. It's getting out of hand. My shit's getting less stable because of it. Just ban it, and it's gone. And all that money and all that investment and all that time and effort vanishes, and there ain't fuck you can do about it, bro."
I would say 20 years ago you might be right, but today it's not that easy.
It's more corrupt when it comes to the who owns politics.
I'm not saying the corruption's not there. I'm saying the ability to manipulate society is not what it used to be.
I'm not talking about society. I'm talking about currency.
Well, that is society. That's part of it.
But control, understand. We went into Iraq for 1,000 reasons, but one of the biggest
reason was the business.
They were no longer going to use American money. They were going to switch to the euro.
Sure.
That was what got the money behind it. And it didn't matter that George Bush wanted to invade Iraq. It wouldn't have happened if the moneyed guys who knew they were going to lose a shit ton if they switched to the euro. That's because they'd have just called their guys. They own enough of Congress. They own enough of the Senate that they can make the calls, and it's gone. And for me, the only reason I play around with Dogecoin, I play around with Bitcoin, all of it, just for
I
fun.
just checked it earlier because
but the reason
Family Cares is at 39 cents just a minute.
I'm never going to go too big into any of it is because I know it can vanish.
Right.
Yeah.
In a way that anything
can vanish.
The one thing the hedge funds can't do is control the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
That's the only area.
I agree.
How about those aliens?
And how about I just bought 21,989 coins real quick because it dropped to a buy point. Just so y'all know, about 39 cents. Oh, yeah.
Nice.
So we're making money on the podcast here.
Of course, we're all making money.
Listen. I will say
this has been a super fun conversation.
I'm enjoying the hell out of it.
And it's really important because we have to have. The more people have these conversations, the more these positive changes will happen.
Yeah.
And I don't care how we get there, as long as we get there. But I do think I highly recommend reading that book and listening to some of these people.
Message me the name of it.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. But I think you'll be amazed at how quickly things are changing technologically and how much that affects everything. And a lot of even our government system is not designed to deal with these types of rapid changes. So hopefully
we all figured. See, our society does adapt, though. We all figured out a better way to beat off.
We've never experienced something like this.
You said to beat off?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm getting down.
I'm literally
professional.
And the thing that's
in your DNA.
The thing that's so great about it is, as our technology advanced, we not only found a way to make our porn free, we found a way to make our porn free, and the people making the porn make even more money.
I like it. I like it.
That's our system. That's how our system works.
So porn will save the country.
I just got to tell you,
Dude, you would not have broadband internet on your phone right now without porn.
Probably true. It's a huge business.
So just so you know, the porn industry.
It's most of the internet. Like
the porn industry makes
70-80% of the actual traffic on the internet is just porn.
The porn industry is the largest film industry.
Well, everything's about sex, right?
In the world.
Yeah, you think Avatar made money?
Yeah, the porn industry is the largest film industry in the world,
and it's been that way before the internet too.
That's
right. Yeah.
Makes more money, more productions, more things than any other film, than Disney, than everybody, right?
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, so you were talking about, hey, you've perfected how to masturbate. I've been doing it for a while, obviously, right? I got to tell you, slightly, somebody needs to turn this into a bit.
I didn't. Society
did. Somebody's got to turn this into a bit, though. How irritated do you get when your wife or your girlfriend tries to, when they decide they're not going to give you a blowjob and they're just going to give you, how they're like, I'm not going to do that, but I will give you a hand job.
Unenthusiastically?
Yeah, and I'm like, no, I've been doing this for fucking how long? Like, you think you can fucking do a hand? I can jack my own dick. Like, if you want to suck my dick, fine. Otherwise, I'll do it myself, right? So I just want to point that out. There's some humor here.
I think that's been done.
I don't know how to turn it into a bit.
Many times.
Sure that was
Oh, well, see, I'm just not in y'all's circles.
but that is the beauty of someone that hasn't done comedy. And we all went through it, is we have these ideas. Like, I had so many ideas right before I started that I was like, this is going to revolutionize comedy. And then, like, third open mic I was at, some dude was like, hey, man, that's a Patrice O'Neal bit. Damn it! It's not exactly the same, but you're stepping on his dick. Like, that is what doing comedy the longer you do it does. It sharpens those edges. Either you lean into being a full hack and it doesn't matter, or you work hard to lean out of it.
Yeah.
Dude, there's guys out there that make a absolute living doing stand up, and all they do is shit that repurposed versions of Cat Williams jokes.
And then all the topical stuff, you'll hear a lot of the similar premises, but they're they're done differently, which is fine.
All right, man, we got to wrap this up because I got to piss.
Oh, yeah.
I got to get home.
We need to wrap it,
Well, dude, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Dude, it was super fun.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And we just incoherent babbling mostly, but I think we made our points. Yeah. And I'm gonna
have to go back and watch this one over again.
I do absolutely agree with your premise of where we're gonna get. I think the fundamental disagreement is how long it's gonna take us to get there. Sure. And until the incredibly smart people start recognizing how important power is.
I think they do.
But
because they're pretty powerful too. A lot of the really smart people are powerful.
They're really not real power. We don't have kings in this country, but we do have people that through wealth and the desire to purchase political influence control more than any king ever controlled.
Sure. Yeah.
And that power can't be ignored. Like what Murdoch can do, what the Koch brothers can do, George Soros can do. I mean, I know everybody. I don't mean like, but there's so much power and influence. Plus, I mean, go through the list of the top hedge fund guys. All of them own at least 8 senators. They control the regulations that affect their companies. They control, and it literally would take one session. It would take Congress about 2 days and Senate, and if enough influence came down to make them do it, because both sides are bought and paid for when it comes to the economy.
Absolutely.
Like when it comes to social issues and all that stuff that we pretend and fake and argue about. That stuff's not. But when it comes to the actual economy, they're both bought and paid for by the same people.
Well, a lot of it goes to all of it. It's all affected by money.
Right.
Yeah.
But the second those guys make those calls, cryptocurrencies are gone.
Yeah, they just need to let me know in advance so I can short everything.
But it doesn't matter.
I think the cat's out of the bag on that one, though.
But no, the second somebody wants to, enough rich people got freaked out by what happened with GameStop that you're going to start seeing a lot more legislation about things like Robinhood. Yeah. You're going to start all of a sudden.
But also you get into the constitutional aspect of that, and I think
there's a lot of places
some of that will be
ban.
reversed because it's unconstitutional.
The Constitution's whatever the Supreme Court says it is, dude.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like the Constitution doesn't say anything unless the Supreme Court agrees.
Yeah, that's true.
The First Amendment means whatever those people, and especially now with how politically established the court is now.
Yeah, and just so you know, Warren doesn't like Robinhood, and there are several states that are trying to ban Robinhood in their state. It's actively going on right now. So I agree with you. I think there's I don't know the whole reasons, but they're making accusations that Robinhood is too much like gambling.
You mean like the stock market?
Yeah.
So's the whole stock market.
Oh no, I'm just telling you. I'm repeating what they're saying.
This is gambling for the rich. We're
Yeah.
not. We don't want poor people gambling.
We don't want poor people having.
We get their
Right.
gambling money on lottery.
So
that's how states.
How
get their
about freedom?
revenues.
I just want people
on
to be
Saturday,
free.
Saturday
What the fuck
night.
they want to do, right?
So Doge was at like, I don't know, 79. I already had basically stop sales and different. I had things in place already anyway, so it didn't matter to me. But when it peaked, Robinhood went offline again for like an hour, and while it crashed, it's starting to becoming a reoccurring.
It's almost like somebody's in charge.
Yeah. It's I'm like so. But anyway,
But Salesforce, my wife, she's a Salesforce developer, well, she was. Now she's CFO of a company called Blue 360 Media. But
did they do the same thing? Because I was considering some Salesforce stuff, but I'm looking for some alternatives. Is she did the same thing or something different?
dude, I'm telling you, she's the company that she's the CFO for now. They still use Salesforce, dude.
That's the way to go.
There's an argument to be made for it, but when it comes to actual usability, controllability, and expandability, it's the best.
I gotcha.
But that's a 12-hour conversation, not worth
No,
a
yeah.
podcast. But
Well, I want to circle back to that because it's something I'm looking at for different solutions. We'll talk about that later.
Honestly, I'll give you a number. Like you can call us and talk to you about it for a couple hours and like really sort of. Because it's a lot more complicated than most people are looking at.
Oh no,
it does so much more.
I just barely tipped my toe into it and realized because you got the free plan and I was $17,000 deep.
Yeah.
Just dipping my toe into it.
Yeah.
Thinking I haven't spent the money yet, but just getting quotes on what I want to do.
Yeah, she just worked on right before she was the consulting firm she was working with. They just ran through a $500,000 Salesforce connected to an app development program.
Yeah.
And it was initial budgeting for it was like I think it was like $200,000, and by the time they were done, and it wasn't her because she was sitting there saying, these app developers are screwing you through the way they're doing this. It ended up $500,000, and I mean that company's never getting that money back. I mean, and the app's not even that great because they didn't integrate it the right way. They tried to do too much of their own code. They tried to do too much, and they were just one of the same company. It was not the same company, but a similar company to the one that designed the unemployment system for Florida, where it's just there's a handful of these companies out there that they know how to sell, but they don't know how to code. So
that's hilarious. No, I definitely would love. She'd be a great resource then. But sounds good.
Do you have any shows coming up that you want to plug?
Nothing that I'm sure. I've basically kept from booking my road schedule back up until in the fall. I've got about 10 shows in the fall, but I've got Dallas, Austin, handful of others. But I'm not even going to really start promoting those yet because
wait till things open back up all the way. Yeah.
And again, because my wife makes pretty good money, and we've got savings, and I'd been doing pretty well for the last few years of comedy. I was able to not really have anything other than my online streaming. I'm not going to give the number, but I make more than a living wage off yelling into my phone.
That's good.
So.
And just to be clear, I'm physically conservative and socially liberal, and actually,
which is why you're wrong. Cause
oh, okay.
You should be just as liberal when it comes to economics. But
well, I mean, I guess you could take a lot of my perspective as liberal.
Well, you really can.
But it's really not.
You're more communist than a communist.
I'm not though. Not at all. Not
I just think everybody should get $40 an hour. Is all.
It's not that simple.
If they're working,
it's not that simple.
If they show up and dig a ditch, then they get $40 an hour.
Can't work with this.
I pride myself on being a face-to-face, belly-to-belly, and I want to tell you that I want to win, which means someone has to lose, right? I just want to control the loss. I don't think lose means you're starving. Your kids are starving.
I don't think anybody has to lose.
A roof over your head. I just want to control the floor.
Poorest people in America get more calories a day than most kings throughout history.
Yeah. So I mean,
our system isn't broken.
Yeah.
Our system has actually elevated more people than any system in the history of the world.
Right. Yeah.
But our system does need to be tweaked. It does need to take into account more things like the technological events that are happening. Of course. But
don't want to tear the house down. Just want to add to it.
But the idea that our system, and again, it's you can say it's semantics, but when you make the argument that our system is fundamentally broken, I've had a fundamentally broken pinky toe, and it really didn't affect my day at all. And there's also people that had a spine snapped, and that fundamentally, so there's a difference. And if you don't control the language of it more, then I think it can interfere with the messaging.
Sure.
And that's
true.
Dude, you're a comic now. You got to learn how messaging works. Not marketing, because that's gross, but messaging.
I got it.
It was fun.
All right, this was super fun, guys. Thanks for having me.
How can
Later,
they
guys.
find you on social media?
Just Google James Hodge, and I'm the first one that comes up. Unless
Awesome.
you find there's a car dealership, but other than that,
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. It's been awesome. And if you guys enjoyed the episode, be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Let's get a